Hello, everyone. Welcome to the study group live stream and pre-show. If you are watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes. You can also, if this is at least a day after the show, there is a complete timestamp in the YouTube comments where you can jump to any part of the study group and after show at any time just by clicking on the timestamp, which is very, very convenient. So if you don't want to listen to all of this on the replay, you can simply jump to wherever you like. You can go all the way to the first question, go to the last question, you go to the phone calls, you can go wherever you want in the study group. It's like magic. Thanks for being here. Now that I'm live, people will show up. We'll have the notifications go out in about 5 minutes. Let's make sure people are indeed showing up. This is really the key for any live event is to make, well, it's not really a key, I guess. I'll still have the live event. It'll just be, very boring. Hello, Chicago. Washington State is in the chat room. If you are watching this live on the YouTube side, then you'll notice there's no chat there. The chat is in front of me. The chat is on my website. So if you go to professormesser.com/live, the chat is there. You can optionally go to the online list of live event chat, and you can pop that out. You can just have it there at the bottom of the screen. Whatever you'd like to do. Virginia's here. Welcome, Virginia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am struggling to get rid of this cold that I've had for weeks, for at least the beginning of this year. Since Christmas, I guess, really, when I think about it. It's been a while. It was, or was it New Year's Eve? I'm trying to remember. I think it was Christmas Eve when I got this thing. Still trying to shake it. Still hanging on. We're now buddies. We're friends. We're inseparable. Me and this chest cold. Something that everyone should enjoy. So it's going around, as they say. So that's what that is all about. So now that we've gotten that out of the way and you have way too much information about my current health status, how's everybody else? How's everybody doing? In the chat room, I put together an amazing PDF with links for the 901 902 A+ study guide. Thank you. Any plans on making that for Network Plus or Security Plus? No, because I already have. There are no plans because they already exist. In fact, there is course notes available for the 901, 902. There's course notes available for the current Network Plus. There's course notes available for the current Security Plus. There are current course notes available for the 1001, 1002 A+ exam, which are full and complete. Some people are asking, since the videos are being created now, are the course notes complete? Yes, of course. Oh, the questions. That's a different thing. So there's questions is different than the course notes. So I apologize. I took study guide to mean course notes. You mean Q&A, which are kind of nice to have the questions and the answers, and you click and it goes. I agree. It's nice to have that format. And my plan after I finish A+, is to have Network Plus, Security Plus Q&A as well. In fact, I've already started writing the Security Plus ones. They're really, really good. They're going to be in more of a style of a sample exam rather than just random questions scattered about. My plan is to give you the exact distribution of questions in the same style as they ask on the exam. These are not exam questions. I am not copying exam questions, but I want to give you at least a heads up that this is the style, the complexity, the voice, the type of question cadence that you would get on the exam. So that's one of those things. So I'm working on that now. My plan is to release probably 3 sample questions at a time in these sample packs, and then you can just scoop them up and learn everything you can about them. Plus, each one of them not only has the answer, but it goes through every answer and tells you why a particular response was the correct or not correct response. So if there's A, B, C, and D, I'll tell you why A was correct, but I'll also tell you why B, C, and D were not correct. So you can at least understand some of the psyche of these exam questions, which are sometimes difficult to figure out. Sometimes we do need professional help for those. I don't know. We've got that. So I do want to have those. Finding good questions is really, 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 really hard. I'm not sure why we've made it so difficult. There's bad questions. I find these on the internet all the time. There's bad questions. I'm going to do a camera check as we're talking. There's bad questions that I run into on the internet. There are questions that are just wrong. There's wrong questions. Like, you're not even close. You're not even in the ballpark of what the right question is for this. It's not even the right question or the right answer, or the question doesn't make sense. It's just bad quality. And there's nothing worse when you're trying to study for an exam to run into a set of questions that you thought were going to be good, but it turns out they're not so good at all. So that's really my goal, is to find something for you that is of a higher quality that you can trust. It's really hard to find those. There's not a lot of good stuff out there, unfortunately. I get emails all the time where people will send me questions from another site that says, "What is this about?" And I say, well, you're not wrong, that it's a mess, that's not a good question. Just ignore it and keep going. The fact that you recognize that it's a bad question is probably more important than any of the topics associated with this mess of a question anyway. So yes, I agree. I need to have those. I need to have A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So I'll be updating the A+ as well for those. And then there's other things happening. Not just A+, not just Network Plus, not just Security Plus. There's a lot of things I want to do. So we're going to figure out what I can do. We're going to see how this goes. It's one of the challenges with trying to figure out what to do next. Am I going to do Pen Test Plus? Not a chance. Not even close to being a chance. Let's stick to reality. Let's stick to what people can actually use to get a job with. That's what we're going to do. And Pen Test Plus is not one of those things. Pen Test Plus sounds awesome. It's such fun. Going in and attacking networks and checking for vulnerabilities and running exploits and gaining root access. Now I'm administrator and I did a buffer overflow. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. There are, I should say, very few people in the world do that. So that's why I don't do Pen Test Plus. That's why I don't do those niche kind of hot and cool pen test, penetration test, CEH test. No, we're not. Pen testers is such a tiny percentage of the security jobs that are out there. It just doesn't make sense to do that. I actually already have CCNT questions. I need to put it into a book form. It's currently in an app form. But I need to do that. I have a full set of 180 questions, all CCNT, that I wrote in the same style and form as the actual CCNT exam. Those are done too, but I need to put them in a book form. It's all about time. That's what we need to do. It's all about time. No plans for CISA Plus either. Again, it's so niche. Of those, I would like to do the second half of that. I would like to do the ICND2. I would like to do ICND2 course notes. I would like to do ICND2 Q&A. Again, there's a big list of things I'd like to do. Someone's either told me it's a sign of someone who is truly an entrepreneur, that they have an enormous list of things that they could never ever possibly get through, or it's a sign of someone who's a little crazy. So you choose which one of those it happens to be. I'm not sure which one it is. John Woo passed Security Plus last Friday. Congratulations. I'm glad the videos could be part of your studies. I'm glad they helped. You did the hard part. You actually took the exams. Not an easy exam. It's a tough exam. Got a minute till we get started. 1 minute, Mr. Sinatra, before we get started. We've got plenty of Q&A today. We'll be doing this, and I'll take questions in the second half of the show. And we'll get that going too. This is going, recording. Oh, I have so much to work on for this. This is, let's put a link in here, Security Plus study group. And we're going to say that it's at professormesser.com/live. I'm going to put that in the chat room. I'm going to put that over here. And it's time to get started, everybody. Look at this. Is it? We got 5-6 seconds. We got some stuff going on. Let's do this. Here we go with the study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2019 Security Plus Study Group, our first study group for Security Plus in the year 2019. Thank you for being here. If you're watching this live, thank you for being in the chat room. Thank you for watching on the YouTube. Thank you for watching on my website. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this next hour of interactive live on the internet magical Q&A. I might have oversold that just a little bit. But in any case, we will be doing Q&A. It all comes from the Security Plus exam. I'll be asking you questions. You'll be able to answer those questions live on the internet, and we'll get to see how we do. The second half of the video is this live stream is me just opening up the phone lines and taking questions from the chat room. If you are watching this on the YouTube and you're at a YouTube site right now, you'll notice there's no live chat there. The live chat right now is at professormesser.com/live. And if you join us during one of these live streams, I'm watching the chat room. It's right in front of me. It's sitting, I see it. It's the blue that's on my screen right here is the chat room that you are talking to me on with this. So you will absolutely be able to communicate back and forth, and I'll be able to answer questions on those. Like people asking in the chat room, is that a green screen behind me? No, this is a real room. That is real stuff on that's a real thing. So nope, we're all real and live, and thank you for being here. We've got plenty to go through today, so let me quickly go through our announcements today. I'm able to do this live stream thanks to your ongoing support. As many of you already know, all of my courses are available for you to watch free online. Every minute of every video. There's no videos behind a paywall. I don't make you register anything. I don't send you constant emails begging for anything. You don't get on a mailing list. I don't even know if you watch it or not. I don't track those kind of things. It drives people crazy in the industry when I say those type of things. But that's the deal. I give you free content, and there's some other things later on we'll talk about that you could buy if you wanted to, but you don't have to. It's completely up to you, and it's a no pressure kind of situation. If you do want to get offline version of the audio or video that you can take with you, those are for sale, and you can have a look at those at professormesser.com/getsecplus or from the links on my website. Don't forget to follow what we're doing here on the Twitter, probably more important on the YouTube. You hear people all the time say, please subscribe to YouTube. Please, if you want to get notifications, click the bell, that kind of thing. You don't necessarily have to click that bell. That obviously could be annoying at times, especially if I'm posting things that have nothing to do with what you're studying for. But YouTube does look at those subscription numbers very carefully, and I'm able to get some extra help from them and talk to some people at corporate, which is kind of nice. They can see that indeed there must be people actually watching this because you've taken the time to subscribe. So if you have done that, thank you very much. Doesn't cost you a thing, and boy, it means a whole lot to me. So thanks so much. This is a live stream, a video that you can watch the replay on my website. That is something you can absolutely do. And we're going to very quickly, because my wife knows that we're doing a live stream right now, she's calling me. So that must be a thing. So hold on, everybody. Okay. Turns out it wasn't a thing at all. Turns out she's just calling me about a thing. Oh, but got lots of points for answering that phone call. I do this video live and I have a replay on my site. And by the way, if you're someone who is just tired of flipping through this replay and like to go right to the questions on the replay, about a day later, an entire breakdown, minute by minute, of exactly what we're doing. Timestamps are placed into the YouTube description. So if you go to the video description on YouTube, you can click the timestamp and jump around wherever you would like. So absolutely do something like that. But I have an audio version of this available in podcast form. So if you have a podcasting program and you catch some of those things, absolutely go check that out. It's at professormesser.com/podcast. You can both subscribe and even listen to the audio stream from that page as well if you would like to. This and all of the information that we're doing here is from the SY0501 exam. That is the latest Security Plus exam. It was released in October. This is a relatively new exam because it's only been out about a year and a few months, year and 3 or 4 months now, October of 2017. So this is in the world of CompTIA exams that are updated about every 3 years. This is a relatively new version of this, and it's a relatively detailed version of this. All of the information that we're going to go through comes directly from the exam objectives. If you don't have the Security Plus exam objectives, make sure you get them. Pretty important. There is a single exam that you have to take to pass and earn your Security Plus certification. It is 90 minutes long. You'll have 90 minutes on the timer, and it's about 90 questions. You'll probably get fewer than that. It's a maximum of 90 questions to do that. Passing score is on a scale of between 100 and 900. The passing score is 750, which means there's no way to tell how this thing works anyway. And I think that's intentional from the folks at CompTIA. They don't want to give too much away. Each question's worth a different number of points. There's really no way to know exactly what means what. Just do the best you can. Get the highest number you can. That's the pretty important part. There are plenty of questions to go through on the exam that are the traditional multiple choice. Choose A, B, C, or D. But there are performance-based questions on the exam. Performance-based questions are anything but multiple choice. These could be fill in the blank. They could be questions for matching. It could be drag and drop. It could be putting things in a particular order from fastest to slowest, or highest to lowest, or in any particular order. So there's plenty of things in that list that it could possibly be. We're going to do a performance-based question first thing on this live stream. So prepare for this. I have a performance-based question for you, and you'll find that indeed it probably isn't too different than the multiple choice. Nothing to worry about. We are going to do this because you will be able to follow and answer live on the internet as long as you're watching this live. If you're watching this in the replay, there's no live notification at the top there, then you won't be able to do this. But everybody who's here, the few hundreds that are here right now, can follow along. You pop open a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA. QA. I think it stands for question answer. Someone was able to provide me with that information. Thank you. There's also an app you can do that you can use for this. It is the Socrative student app. It will ask for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer. All one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So that makes it easy. And if you've done those things, and a number of you have, if you have done those things, there will be a question waiting for you. That question asks, which type of authentication protocol would be the best choice for ongoing authentication during the same session? Now, you'll notice this, if you were here last month, this looks familiar because it is. This is what we call our study group rewind question, where we take the single question from last month, we put it in this very first part so we can make sure that you're able to get into the Q&A, you're able to answer, you're able to do that. While you're answering that, Anthony asked in the chat room, hey, CompTIA wouldn't hold it against anyone for skipping A+ and taking Security Plus, would they? Nope, they're fine with that. Security Plus has no formal prerequisite, and many people do take Security Plus as their very first CompTIA exam, myself included. Security Plus was my very first CompTIA exam that I took because I was working as a systems engineer for a security company. And so I thought, maybe I should take security as what I'm doing, which seemed to work out. I actually took mine in order of Security Plus, Network Plus, and then A+. Back to our question, we have many people answering this one. You can see that our possible answers are PAP, PPP, Radius, CHAP, and HTTPS. So which type of authentication protocol would be the best choice for ongoing authentication during the same session? Would it be PAP, PPP, Radius, CHAP, or HTTPS? All real things. Not all of them are authentication protocols, however. 53% of you, though, did choose CHAP. CHAP would probably be, we look at the popularity answer there, or the people that were here last month. Yeah, that's it. It's the Challenge Handshake Authentication Protocol. There's not only a three-way handshake to get things going with the challenge that it uses, but it also goes through the process of making sure that it does some additional ongoing authentication, which is kind of nice. So it's useful to have that ongoing process with these. So pretty useful. The Socrative student app, Socrative, not Socratic. Socrative student app's what you want. And then those of you that are able to do that, there you are. Nice job, the 60% of you that said, oh, it must have been CHAP. Of course it was. Of course it was CHAP to have that there. So nice job with that. Looks like a lot of you are already in there. A lot of you are grabbing the Socrative student app. A number of you have checked the website or just popped open a new browser to professormesser.com/QA. Let's now do a performance-based question. Let's move away from multiple choice. As you're probably aware, every month, the very first question is a performance-based question. So hopefully I have typed these things right in my screen. You'll be able to see this. Our question, our performance-based question of the month is this one. It is a fill-in-the-blank question, which is making it a little bit more difficult. And the question asks, what secure protocol should you use for these tasks? What secure protocol should you use for these tasks? The first task is digitally sign email messages and attachments. What secure protocol should I use for that? There's probably more than one option there. So I'll accept more than one, but I'll give you my choice for that one. Number 2 is encrypt the login page on a website. What secure protocol? So we have at least 5 answers you're going to have to put in on this. There'll be 5 different secure protocols for this. I don't repeat them. That'll be a little hint I give you. So these are 5 different secure protocols. The third one is gather performance metrics from routers and switches. What secure protocol would you use for that task? The fourth one is participate in a confidential company conference call. Participate in a confidential company conference call. Maybe I should have said I needed to collaborate in a confidential company conference call. Why didn't I put that in there? Oh, missed opportunities. And the fifth one is transfer files to an external file server. Transfer files to an external file server. So what secure protocol would you use for these tasks? What do you use to digitally sign email messages and attachments? What would you use to encrypt the login page on a website? What would you use to gather performance metrics from routers and switches? What would you use to collaborate in confidential company conference calls? Oh, just angry about that now. And lastly, what would you do to transfer files to an external file server? Again, some of these have multiple answers. I will accept multiple answers on these. And a number of you are putting in multiple answers on these. I'm watching them go by on my screen. I won't show you all of this. But let's see how we did. A number of you are Googling madly. Do not Google your answers. In fact, you're really not going to find an easy way to Google this. And this is the challenge, by the way, that you will find throughout the Security Plus exam. Very rarely, almost never, like super rare, would you ever get a question that is giving you an acronym or an abbreviation and asking you what that acronym or abbreviation means. The exam doesn't do that. The exam asks you how to use it. So I'm looking for some acronyms here, but you'll notice none of these terms, none of these things I put up have any association with an acronym. So you really have to know what they are. So let's step through each one of them. Let's see how we did on each one of these. What secure protocol would you use for these tasks? To digitally sign email messages and attachments, there are a lot of different secure protocols you can use. Now, if you put PGP, a number of you have put PGP in here. Yes, I think I would accept that. PGP or GPG is a good one. In fact, later on, I'll tell you how you can get continuing education unit credit for watching this first hour, and I'll tell you how I send you a digitally signed email message. So we'll talk about that. Another one, and a number of you have put this one because it is in the CompTIA exam objectives, is SMIME. SMIME is the Secure Multipurpose Internet Mail Extensions, of course, that I had to go look to remember exactly what the abbreviation was because we never call it the Secure Multipurpose Internet Mail Extensions. We always call it just SMIME. Have you configured SMIME for that? MIME would be putting the attachments on and sending them an email. SMIME would be the secure version of that. And for some reason, it's S/MIME. I don't know why. Why do we put the slash in there? You got me. But there it is. SMIME's the one I put there. There's a lot of other options that are in here. Hashing does not actually digitally sign. Hashing has to be encrypted to be a digital signature. So not just the same thing. Number of you put PGP, I'll accept that. Absolutely. Some of you, let's do another one. Some of you have put some interesting things in for the second one. The second one is encrypt the login page on a website. This one might be a gimme because I'm looking through the list here. Since this is fill in the blank, I have to manually go through the list that's in front of me. And I think practically everyone got this right. A number of you answered HTTPS, which I will accept. That's the one I stuck down here, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. Some of you put TLS or SSL, which is also perfectly acceptable when you describe the encryption of a website. I'm pretty flexible with these answers, and I think those are completely acceptable. TLS being the accurate version, SSL being what we still call it. We still call it SSL encryption. We haven't used SSL in a long time, in years and years and years and years and years. We've used TLS for years and years and years. TLS replaced SSL effectively. And we called it TLS to really show that it was a replacement for it. Did we call it now TLS? No, we still call it SSL. So don't be angry with people when they say it's SSL encryption. We all understand in the security world it's TLS, but SSL, it just flows off the tongue a lot easier. It's easier to say. Maybe that's what it is. The third on our list, gather performance metrics from routers and switches. Gather performance metrics from routers and switches. Really the only choice here is SNMP version 3. SNMP, of course, the Simple Network Management Protocol, very commonly used to gather metrics from devices, from routers, from switches, from servers, from firewalls, from proxies, from anything that's in your network, can probably talk back to a management station with SNMP. Even your workstation can have an SNMP driver on it. We can gather metrics from your workstation with SNMP. We usually don't, though. There's a point where you're just getting too much information. The only version of SNMP that has any type of encryption or protection of the data, though, is SNMP version 3. So make sure you know the differences between V1, V2, and V3. That's pretty important, especially from a security perspective. Pardon me. Let's go to number 4, where the option was collaborate in a confidential company conference call. What would be the best secure protocol for that task? I think the best one here is the real-time protocol, real-time transport protocol, but instead we're using the secure version of that, the secure real-time transport protocol. Sometimes you'll see it called real-time transport protocol secure. Either one of those is acceptable for those easily to have that there. So SRTP would be the right answer. And the last option, number 5, is transfer files to an external file server. A number of you answered this one. Did I put both in? I did put both. So many of you answered one of these. You answered FTPS, which is FTP over SSL. A number of you put SFTP, which is file transfer over SSH. Both are completely reasonable. Both are completely acceptable. Both are used constantly, depending on what port on your protocol, port on your firewall is open. Can I get through your firewall with this one? Let's try the other one. That's how we figure out those differences. So if you're worried about secure protocols, all of this information, by the way, comes from the SY0 501 exam objectives, section 2.6, and my video called Secure Protocols. If you want to get more information, learn more about secure protocols, and learn about all of the other secure protocols that you need to know for the exam, that's the video you need to go to. And I think most of you did pretty well on that one. There's no way for me to tally it up since it was a fill in the blank, but just looking through the answers, I think most of you did pretty well with that. Some of these were tricky, so make sure you are very familiar with the secure protocols and how they're used, not just their name. Don't just know that Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure is HTTPS. That's not enough. You have to know when you would use that. So go deep. Go really deep into understanding how these protocols operate, and you'll do just fine on the exam, and you'll do just fine in whatever security job you happen to find. Very nice to have that. Let's now move away from performance-based questions. Let's do a traditional multiple choice question. No more fill in the blank. Let's do this. Next question asks, which of the following would be the best way to segment two IP subnets that are physically located on the same switch? Which of the following would be the best way to segment two IP subnets that are physically located on the same switch? Would it be air gaps? Would it be VLANs? Would it be OS virtualization? Would it be static routing? Or would it be firewall policies? Those are your 5 options. So you've got you want to segment two IP subnets. They're physically located on the same switch. Would you use air gaps, VLANs, OS virtualization, static routing, or firewall policies? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put the answer in the chat room. Do not comment in the chat room. There's no hints in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we're sitting in the exam environment. We can't Google. We don't have our phones. They've taken away everything we know about technology. It's difficult to breathe. We just can't handle this lack of technology. We've got an old CRT in front of us and a mouse that still has the ball in the bottom. We're barely able to use the testing center's computer. By the way, if you're in that testing center, you need to find a different testing center. I think all of them at this point should have at least LCDs, although you'll notice it's the very small ones. For some reason, they put very small LCDs in there. And they, at least most of them, have an optical mouse now. So hopefully your testing center has something a little different. In our school, you can use internet and books with tests and exams. No, you can't, Sam. Unfortunately, you cannot on this contractually. You're not able to do that with the A+ certifications. So sorry. So then people in the chat room are going, well, I answered, and I thought about it a little bit, and then I realized I put the wrong answer down. Yes, I hope I do not do this on my test. Well, this is the chance. You can now go through, get all of that out of your system, get all of the wrong, but also on your exam, you can always go back to the previous question and change it. So unlike my particular configuration on Socrative, once you lock in your question, you're done. With the real exam, you can just click the back button and go change the answer, which helps a lot. Let's see how we did with this one. Which of the following would be the best way to segment two IP subnets that are physically located on the same switch? I haven't even looked yet. Let's see how we did. 86% of you said VLANs. 86% of you said VLANs. So that seems like a large number. If I was going to go with what everybody's trying to yell at me about what the right answer is, we would have to go there. However, 10% of you said static routing. 3% of you said air gaps. 1% said firewall policies, and 0% said OS virtualization. Well, shockingly enough, the answer may surprise you. No, it won't really surprise you at all. I think most of you are spot on with this one. This is the situation we run into quite often. These were sort of the old days, too. You sometimes will run into this. You might have one customer or one group of people or a department of people on one physical switch. Maybe that's shipping and receiving. Then you got another department. Here's accounting. They're on their own physical switch. But obviously, you can see there's 2 devices per department. But our switch is 24 ports big. So we're wasting a lot of power. We're wasting money on additional switches. We're wasting money on having to manage all of these extra switches. It's kind of a pain when that comes up. So a lot of people would like to put this on a single switch. And one of the best ways that you can logically segment these devices, so they're still separated, there's still no way that shipping and receiving can directly communicate to the folks in accounting and vice versa, is to obviously, as many of you have already said, configure VLANs on the switch. These are virtual local area networks. So you define some switches as belonging to shipping and receiving. You take some switches, they belong to accounting, and never the twain shall meet. They're now separated logically instead of physically. If you wanted those 2 groups to talk to each other, you would have to put a router in the middle. Or you would have to build a router inside of your switch. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as a layer 3 switch. What it really is a switch that allows you to configure a software router inside of it so that all of those devices can communicate to them. It's not like you're changing the switching, you're not changing the routing, you're just putting a switch and a router in the same chassis, really, for those to have all of that. So that would be indeed the best way to segment 2 IP subnets that are physically located in the same switch, is to have that functionality of VLANs, and we use them all the time. VLANs are pretty normal to have that there. So make sure you understand VLANs. If you've never really worked on the security side, on the network administration side, this is a very common way to separate things in a switch. It's not supported on all switches. If you have a home router, a router that's designed for a small office or home office, or even the routers you have at home, you'll notice there's no VLANs there. There's no VLAN functionality. You have to have at least a switch that can support VLANs, and then you're able to provide that separation. And if you're in an enterprise, you're in even a small office, a medium-sized office, the switches they're using most likely are going to support VLANs. You're not going to have a problem with that. And if you answered B, VLANs, got that one absolutely right. 87% of you were spot on. Let's see if we can make these questions a little harder. I don't want to give you too many gimmies. We should learn something while we're here. So let's do another one. And here's our question, which is asking you, a user's account is configured to only provide the minimum access required to complete their work objectives. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? A user's account is configured to only provide the minimum access required to complete their work objectives. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Would it be defense in depth? Would it be permission auditing? Would it be service account? Would it be least privilege? Or would it be group-based access control? One of those is the right answer. You folks are locking in your questions very fast on this one, which concerns me. That's where we get into figuring out what we should be doing, where we should be getting these from. And if you got this one, you thought, I know this one's spot on, I got it with all of these, then well done. Then you've gone through this content, you know it very well to be able to do that. So well done with all of that. User's account is only configured to provide the minimum access required to complete their work objectives. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? So I think in this case, this is where we should be striving for most of us from an IT security perspective to provide the right kind of access for our users. We want to give them just the amount necessary to be able to complete their work objectives. And that's what we want to focus on, is figuring out those details. And in fact, most of you, I think, were spot on with this one as well. 84%. What I thought was going to be a difficult question, you said, no. We are completely up to date with the security plus requirement of least privilege. 12% did say group-based access control. And although group-based access control will provide you with a way to implement a least privilege configuration, the concept of providing the minimum access required to complete your work objective can be done in many different ways. It doesn't have to be done through group-based access control, but the concept of what we're talking about that would best describe this configuration could only really be D, least privilege. That is the right answer with this one. Least privilege is the concept that everybody's striving for. You don't want to give people too much access to data. You don't just want to open up the entire database if all they have to do is calculate one particular piece of that and have those capabilities there. So we have to make sure that every single user account is very limited to only what they need, regardless of what they say, regardless of what they want. This is more of a security issue than it is anything else. So this is one of the reasons why we often say, no, you may not have administrative access. No, you can't have administrative access, because that would give you access to things that would allow you to do processes outside of the scope of your job. And that is not something that we can do from a best practice in legal perspective. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're going through the exam. You're thinking about what I need to put in. Make sure you read all of the answers available, and especially one like this that asks you to provide which of the following would best describe the answer. That's what you need to do, is go down that road and figure out the details. There is a ton of information in the Security Plus exam. Everything from knowing about least privilege to secure protocols to risk management to cloud computing. There's tons of encryption and cryptography, an entire section of cryptography. And of course, I've created graphics, I've created charts, I've created text and information that can help you really reinforce those pieces of information. I've created a whole series of course notes where I've gone through every single one of my videos, all of them, and I've taken all of the text, I've taken all of the graphics, I've taken all of those charts, and I put them in this document. It is a very big PDF. How big is this PDF now? So the entire document of just the notes, 94 pages long. It's a huge PDF But if you don't have the time to take the notes yourself, or you don't want to take the notes yourself, it's a great way to have that all in one place. And it's a PDF that you can download right now. It's $20, and you can find out more at professormesser.com/securitycn. We already talked earlier about Mrs. Professor Messer, who was nice enough to call us and say hi. She's the one that said, you need to do more than just digital. You need to do physical. So I made a book of it. She was right. I needed a book of my course notes. These are the same course notes. There's nothing different about the physical version and the digital version. They're exactly the same. It's just one is made from trees and the other one is digital for that. So that's when I say that this is 94 pages, I'm talking only about the notes part. So somebody said, I got it and I printed it out. It's like 110 pages. Yes, because there's a full index to every single. Why am I showing you this on here? I've got a digital version in front of me. There's a table of contents at the front. Let's see if I can show it to you. There it is. There's an introduction, a table of contents. You've got the details, and then it jumps into the course notes themselves, all broken down by video, all of the details. It's important to have pictures of a dumpster in there so you understand what dumpster diving is. It's all there and available. By the way, every single dollar of this goes back to keeping the site running. So I do give away all of those videos for free. This is another way that you can also help support what we do. I don't accept donations. I want to give you something for your hard-earned money, and I hope this is something that can also help you when you're ready to study for the exam. It doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace Q&A, but it is a great way to get those concepts really burned into your brain prior to walking into your exam, and I hope you have a look at that. You can find out more at professormesser.com/securitycn. So thank you for, by the way, your ongoing support. Don't currently support the Cash App, no, but you can use PayPal, which isn't that Cash, or is that's which one is Venmo? Is one of those is PayPal, and the other one is the other one Stripe? I'm trying to remember, but there's some options there too for even Bitcoin Cash. You can use that as well. So thanks for your ongoing support with those. Let's do another question. We're now going to jump to a question that talks about the U.S. federal government. So we'll say that when they are open and available, the question is, what type of agreement is commonly used between U.S. federal government entities to define security controls? What type of agreement is commonly used between U.S. government entities to define security controls? I guess we're assuming these are people who are still at work. So is it an ISA? Is it an SLA? Is it an MOU? Is it a BPA, or is it an MOA? These are not made-up abbreviations. Each one of these is a real thing. So I'm not trying to throw you a curveball here, but you do have to choose which one of these real things it happens to be. This is an agreement that's commonly used between U.S. federal government entities to define security controls. And even if you don't work directly for the U.S. federal government, you're still going to run into situations where you work with entities that work for the U.S. federal government. And it's one of those situations where, yes, that does absolutely mean that you have to know what those things are, because they're going to bring up these terms. They're going to ask you about it, and you have to figure out all of those as well. So what agreement would be the best? If you think you know, go to professormesser.com/QA. We can talk about that. Some folks in the chat room talking about hard drives and clearing them out and what's the most secure. What do you do? People talking about 7-pass software. Complete overkill. So it's we can talk about that in the after show, where we go through how do you make a hard drive really secure, or how do you make an SSD? What do you do when you want to give away an SSD? How do you make that really secure? Boy, there's some good. 3 passes is fine. No, 1 pass is fine. There's 1 pass through. You change the 1 or 0 on a hard drive, it's done. You don't have to do any more than that. There's no magic the extra passes bring, I assure you, for having all those things there. Yes, and by the way, for those of you in the chat room, let's try to keep a professional tone in the chat room when we're talking about things. I think we'll be fine. Let's see, though, how we did. Let's see how our professional tone did with figuring out the answer to this. We're not quite sure. I try to make these questions so half of you get it right. I guess you could say I try to make it so half of you get it wrong. I want it to be a challenging question. I think we've hit one in this particular case. The 48% of you have said ISA. 23% said SLA. A tie for third, 13% apiece said an MOU and an MOA. And then 5% said a BPA. So these are all types of agreements you might run into. The ones that are in this list, let's step through very quickly. The one that we had as our second option as B was SLA, service level agreement. We use SLAs all the time in anybody's, not just the federal government, but we use SLAs to really have some type of agreement, a formal agreement between two organizations. Usually it is a service provider and a customer. And the customer says, if I have a problem, I need you here in 2 hours. That is the minimum service level that I must have. So we'll create a service level agreement that says if anything happens to this hardware, we will be here in 2 hours or less. That's a service level agreement. Very common to have that. Also, you may see a business partner agreement. Usually this is between manufacturers and resellers, not often done to an end user, but it's another type of agreement so that two business partners have an agreement with what type of business arrangement they're going to have. Now, for the federal government, the type of agreement you'll probably find is what 48% of you did say, which is an ISA, which is a little different than the ISA slots. As some of you in the chat room have already said, like, sure, that's one of those old ISA slots in our original IBM PC. I've got one of those, but in this case, it's not, and it's an interconnection security agreement. This is one of those challenges with knowing all of these different abbreviations because there's tons of them in security. This is a very common term in the U.S. federal government. It defines the type of security controls. So when you're connecting up two different entities in the federal government, we all know what the particular agreement means. We all know what the security is going to be between those two organizations, which means in this case, those of you that answered A, ISA, got that one absolutely right. So we've got plenty more questions to go through for this one. There is also more multiple choice on this list. Some of you were asking earlier if there's fill in the blank on the Security Plus exam. Probably not fill in the blank. I don't think on Security Plus we've seen that yet. CompTIA does do fill in the blank with other exams. I've seen this in Linux Plus, for example. I haven't seen the newer Linux Plus yet. I don't know if they're going to keep that or not. They don't tend to do fill in the blank. They tend to do drag and drop, or they'll have a huge list of things, and then you have to drag them and drop them into the blank. So that helps a little bit. It's not knowing it cold. But I like how we can do some multiple choice here and get through some of these. Let's do another question, though. We've got some time left. Let's keep going through this. This question is one dealing with VPNs. So the question asks specifically, a security administrator would like to verify the integrity and authenticity of all data sent through an IPsec VPN. Which of these would meet this requirement? So a security administrator would like to verify the integrity and authenticity of all data sent through an IPsec VPN. Which of these would meet this requirement? Would it be AES? Would it be ECB? Would it be 3DES? I know I'm saying it wrong intentionally. Would it be CBC or would it be HMAC? So those again, AES, ECB, SSS, CBC, or HMAC. Those are your 5 options. Normally on the exam, you get 4 options, by the way. I throw an extra one in. I don't know. Make it more difficult, or does it make it easier? I don't know, but I do it anyway. Sometimes I only give you 4, but most of the time I give you 5. And I'm not sure whether that's good or bad. On the Q&A that I've written, the formal Q&A sample test that I'm planning to produce, the questions I've written, I do 4 answers because that's what you'll see on the exam most of the time. If the question asks you for multiple answers on the exam, they tend to give you 6 or 7 different options. So it's almost like 2 questions. You have to fill out the details for those and to have that all there. I will remind you, by the way, on the exams, everybody has to sign a candidate agreement before you start the exam, so that you are contractually now obligated from an NDA perspective not to provide any information about what you saw on the exam, the content of any questions, or anything else. So make sure as you comment in the chat room, for example, that you don't provide any detailed information about the exam. That would be important as well. So hopefully some of you are familiar with this. If you've ever set up an IPsec VPN, you may have seen this as an option and have all of these there. So that's an important consideration for this, is figuring out which one of these technologies would allow information about integrity and authenticity. Let's see how we did. I haven't looked yet. Here we go. We're not sure. We're not, well, if we go with the 50% rule, 45% of you have said AES at the top. Coming in second, 29%, almost a third, said HMAC. 17% said triple DES. And then a tie for fourth at 5% apiece, ECB and CBC. So we're on the edge with this. Is it AES? Is that the thing that we're trying to get integrity and authenticity? Those of you familiar with AES know that that's an encryption technology. So that would not necessarily provide integrity and authenticity. The answer we were looking for, and the one that does apply as an option to IPsec VPNs, is HMAC. This is a hash. A hash is designed to provide integrity and authenticity. So that's one of the things certain hashes can provide for you. So whenever you see the term integrity, whenever you see authenticity, probably referring to a digital signature, which is a encrypted hash, those are the things you should be thinking immediately, hash or encrypted hash for these types of things. If you see the term confidentiality, you should immediately be thinking encryption. That's what keeping things confidential is, an encryption type of term. But in our case, I asked you about integrity and authenticity. And that's because folks are asking in the chat room, is that because hashes are a one-way trip? You can't reverse information out of a hash? It's actually because a hash is very unique in the information it provides. It takes a certain input and it provides you with a unique output, a very single unique output that could have only been created by that original input. And that means if I send a copy of the Constitution through my IPsec VPN, on the other end, if I send it with a hash and the other end looks at that data and hashes it and compares that, it should match. And the only way it would match if it was exactly the same as what was sent. That's the beauty of that HMAC and having that there. The hash-based message authentication code. It is there to verify the data that you're receiving is exactly the same data that was sent. It's better, see people in the chat room saying, it's like checksums, right? Yes, think of it as a cryptographic checksum that could not ever possibly be wrong. Checksums can be wrong, by the way, for this, because checksums are only giving us a breakdown of, do the ones and zeros count up properly? If I change the ones and zeros to be actually the same number of ones and zeros on the other end, but they're different, the checksum would actually check out. But this is a cryptographic algorithm where the hash that you get on the other end could not possibly match unless the data is exactly the same. If anything ever changes with that data, it's going to be very, very different in how it operates. It's used in TLS. It's used in IPsec. We use HMAC all the time. It's very, very useful to have that there. There's different versions of it available. Some people were in the chat room are mentioning that SHA-1 was broken 2 years ago. It was not broken. There are certain situations where certain hashes will have what they call collisions, which means that two types of data are sent through, and what comes up on the other side is exactly the same hash, which I already told you should never happen. Should never possibly happen that way. But there are certain situations with certain hashing algorithms where certain collisions have been found. It's still extremely rare to see that. And for certain scenarios, we still use some of, like MD5 has certain collisions that happen with MD5, yet we still use it. Why do we use it? Because it's quick and it's easy, and the chance of collision on what we're doing with it is of low security. For example, if you download a distribution of Linux, next to that distribution may be an MD5 hash, which means you could download the distribution, run an MD5 hash on that, and if it matches, you know you've downloaded the same thing. Now, the reason we're using MD5 is because it's available, it's easy, and we're downloading a Linux distribution for whatever, for our server, for home, if somebody spent the time to find a way to make exactly the same hash on that entire distribution of Linux, that would be incredibly difficult to do. The collisions that we found have been very small bits of data, relatively small pieces of information like a web server certificate, which is not a big file. But an entire ISO of Linux, to find a collision on that would be remarkable, and still have it somehow cause some type of security issue associated with it, which is why we don't really have a problem using MD5 for certain things. For other things that are much more important, we would probably not use MD5. So, or SHA-1. The best practice is not to use them, is to use something stronger, something where we've not found any of these types of collisions, just so we feel better about it. Just so we know we're using a protocol. But for downloading files, why not use MD5? It's not a best practice. Is it practical? Yeah, it's very practical. And for the right situation, that's not federal government secret integrity type of scenario, that probably works fine for you. So you've got those there. So HMAC was actually our right answer. 30%, only 30 you got that one. So I failed you. I wanted half of you to get this one right. Made this one a little too hard. But keep that in mind. AES, triple DES, both of those are encryption algorithms. They are algorithms that will provide confidentiality of data, but they do not provide any way to check to see on the other side if what I received was what was actually sent. So that's kind of a problem on this. We do have also some block encryption methods like ECB and CBC. For those of you familiar with older versions of Security Plus, those were not in Security Plus. This is new to SY0501. Those block encryption algorithms, there's 4 or so of them, 4 or 5 you need to know about. So you can have those too and have them available. ECB and CBC are those methods to do this. AES and triple DES do encrypt in blocks as well. They're not generally streaming, but ECB and CBC are talking about the methodology behind the block encryption. So something, they're not necessarily an encryption. Well, they are an encryption protocol. You need to know about those too. So, but all of those are for confidentiality. A, B, C, and D are all about confidentiality. The only possible answer here describing integrity and authenticity is HMAC is your option E. So there you go. You got plenty of things to go through. If you want more information on that, by the way, that comes directly from Section 6.2. The video is on hashing algorithms. You can find out more information about both of those for this. So let's, we got plenty of time. Let's do another one. I've got more here. We can go through these. This question is one, this might be a gimme too. It was a gimme for me, but I don't know. Sometimes I think it's a gimme and sometimes it isn't. The question asks, which of the following would be the most common way for an attacker to capture all input and output from your computer? Would it be Trojan horse? Would it be rootkit? Would it be keylogger? Would it be adware? Or would it be logic bomb? Which of the following would be the most common way for an attacker to capture all input and output from your computer? The options are Trojan horse, rootkit, keylogger, adware, and logic bomb. The logic bomb. Which one is it? They all sound cool though. Trojan horse, rootkit, keylogger, adware, logic bomb. Which one is it? We don't know. We're taking a guess. I'm not even going to look. I'm going to let you answer. And if you do know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Maybe you'll know the answer too. Plug in your answer. Let's see how we did with this for all of this. These all sound like the names of a group. Yeah, me and Rootkit. We got a gig tomorrow night. We're playing at the Palladium. Got a big thing to do there. Let me take a quick sip of a hot beverage. Nearly choked on that. That would have been great. Would have been 5 minutes of me coughing. Those are the things you worry about when you're giving a live stream. Like, is your wife going to call? That's the first one. Secondly, are you going to go into a choking fit? Don't want to do that either. My eyes they're watering a little bit. That's what happens. So have we gone through this? And now my dad's texting me. It all happens. Nobody, by the way, ever talks to me ever. I sit in this room. I do my work. I never hear from anyone. The moment I go live is how it always works. What's going on? What you doing? How are things going? What's happening? Well, let's find out what's happening. Let's see how we did with this one. Which of the following would be the most common way for an attacker to capture all input and output from your computer? Yes, those in the chat were going, we're talking to you. Yes, you're the ones who should be talking to me. I'm happy talking to you. 58% of you said keylogger. Is this one of those situations where we hit 50% on something, but it really wasn't the 50%? Because 27% of you said rootkit. 11% of you said Trojan horse. 5% said adware. And nobody said logic bomb. Exactly 0% of people said logic bomb. It makes me a little sad. Not really. But 58% said keylogger. Is that really the most common way for an attacker to capture input and output from your computer? In fact, I said the most common way for an attacker to capture all input and output from your computer. I was very clear with that one. All input and output. Keyloggers can absolutely do this. Not just what you're typing in. Keyloggers absolutely can record what's coming the other direction as well. Because it's just software now that's on your computer. It's, of course, watching what you type in. A number of keyloggers, and I do show this in my video 1.1, keyloggers, the aptly named video keyloggers, where they gather information, screenshots. They will capture information coming inbound to your computer. They will connect to your screen. They take the idea of a keylogger and they really expand on it. But absolutely input and output is certainly the case. We often think keyloggers is just what you're typing into the keyboard. And the most basic definition of keylogger, that's true. So that absolutely becomes a big scenario to be able to capture this. Now, people call this, by the way, this is a good example of how this terminology gets spun around all the time, is that the keylogger that I've installed, the one that I'm actually showing you, is a keylogger called Dark Comet Remote Access Tool. But some people call that Remote Access Trojan, which is not actually accurate. You'll see that term, though, in the CompTIA materials. You'll see it in many places. Just because that was installed on a computer doesn't mean it was installed through a Trojan horse. So there's plenty of ways to install a piece of software on someone's computer without them knowing. They don't even necessarily have to bring it in as thinking it is something else. So that is a very common way to do it, of course. But that being a Trojan horse doesn't necessarily mean it's a keylogger. Those two things are mutually exclusive to have all of those things. So hopefully I was able to. And now somebody's asking, what's the difference? It's rewind about 60 seconds and we'll cover it. You'll have all of that information. Keylogger. Now, why wouldn't it be one of these others, by the way? Because I looked at this list. I'm thinking, well, it wouldn't be Trojan horse because a Trojan horse in itself doesn't provide capturing all input and output. Could it? Yes. Does it? A Trojan horse could be anything. It could be a program to simply sit on your computer, wait for a certain time of day, and then delete everything. It could in itself be installing a logic bomb. But a Trojan horse in and of itself has nothing to do with capturing information. It's a method to get data onto your computer. It's a delivery method, not a description of what it's actually doing. If that helps. There is rootkit. And I thought rootkit, well, there you go. It's got to be rootkit because a rootkit, it's in the operating system. It can do whatever it wants now. It has full control of your system. Rootkits are very, very bad. Rootkits are awful in the way they operate. But you'll notice there's not a lot of rootkits out there. In fact, there's fewer and fewer and fewer rootkits as we go because we have technology like Secure Boot that helps us eliminate the concept of a rootkit. And in fact, my question was specifically written, which of the following would be the most common way? Rootkits are remarkably uncommon. They are pretty rare. So you're not going to run into rootkits very often at all for these. So that's why rootkit would not apply here. It's not a very common way of doing anything for this. The only thing that really applies to something capturing all input and output from your computer. It can only possibly be a keylogger in this list because adware doesn't do that. All adware does is show you ads. It doesn't care what you're typing in. They want to show you ads. And we already talked about how logic bomb would not be the right answer with this one either. So some of you here are talking about, hey, this is like a test from CompTIA where they ask you the best way. Right. Yes, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. I'm giving you actual examples from an actual exam using the actual nomenclature from CompTIA. Yes, you will see questions like this on your exam. You absolutely will be asked for the best answer. In fact, I'm kind of giving you easier ones than you'll see on your exam. Because if they usually ask for the best answer, they usually put two answers that could be technically correct, but only one of them is the best one. Well, how do you figure that out? Well, the question will give you context. The question will tell you how to evaluate this from a best to worst scenario. And so you'll be given, maybe all 5 of these answers could have been technically correct. You still have to find the best one for all of those. So some of you saying Trojan and keylogger would be equal answers. Trojan's absolutely not even in the ballpark. The best possible argument you can make here is that rootkit and keylogger could possibly be the right answers. A Trojan horse has nothing to do with what happens on your computer. A Trojan horse is only delivery. Has nothing to do with what happens after the fact. When Trojan horse gets it on your computer, at that point, it's up to whatever that other software does on your computer. Does it delete files? Does it capture screenshots? Does it send information? Does it make you a botnet, participate in a botnet? That's what a Trojan horse gets that information onto your machine. And it's a very common way to get programs running in your machine, but a Trojan horse in and of itself has nothing to do with capturing any type of information from anything. So that's why I really made a point about the Trojan horse and why we incorrectly call a remote administration tool a remote administration Trojan. That doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even make sense when you use the terms that way. You know what doesn't make sense? That we're going to do another question. We only have 3 minutes left. We're going to keep going. Let's do another one. I got one for you. Here's a question. I just clicked it on my side. We'll click on this side. A system administrator would like to identify any web servers that may be advertising their web service or version numbers. Which of these tools would be the easiest way to identify these servers? A system administrator would like to identify any web servers that may be advertising their web service or version numbers. Which of these tools, I guess I could say their web service numbers or version numbers. Which of these tools would be the easiest way to identify these servers? Would it be steganography? Would it be a honeypot? Would it be wireless cracking? Would it be exploitation framework software? Or would it be banner grabbing? Got 5 options there, all real things. I didn't make these up. They're real. Would it be steganography, a honeypot, wireless cracking, exploitation framework software, or banner grabbing? So a system administrator would like to identify any web servers that may be advertising their web service or version numbers. Which of these tools would be the easiest way to identify these servers? Maybe you've used these tools before. I've used all 5 of these tools before. I've done steganography. I've worked with honeypots. I've done wireless cracking. I've used exploitation framework software, and I've done banner grabbing. Which one of these would I pull out of my toolbox and say, here's what we're going to do to be able to solve this issue, to be able to give me information, to be able to identify these servers, which is what it's really asking. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA right there at the bottom. Stop Googling. I think a number of you might know this one. I've not looked at the answers. I have intentionally not looked at the answers. I want to be as surprised as you are. But I think I watch how fast the answers come in. And if a lot of answers come in very quickly, I think, oh, people think they know what this one is. They just locked it in real quick. And you lock it in. You can't go backwards on this one. So that's where that comes from. You get it locked in, not like the real exam. So for those pieces. People also talking about, can we go back and talk about logic bombs for a moment? We sure can, because it's been a ridiculous week for the media, not for political things, for technical things, and talking about logic bombs that don't actually exist. I'll try to find that in the second part of the show. Let's see how we did with this. A system administrator would like to identify any web servers may be advertising their web service or version numbers. Which tools would be easiest to identify these servers? 64% of you said banner grabbing. 64% said banner grabbing. Well over 50. 17% said exploitation framework software. And a tie for third, around 8 to 9% with between steganography and honeypot, and only 2% said wireless cracking. Only 2% said wireless cracking for these. So if we go with what everyone said, banner grabbing, would it answer the question? It would indeed. Banner grabbing is a great way to find information about a version of a particular device. Maybe you're trying to get information about the version of software running on a database server, the version of software running on a web server. Because when you connect to these devices, behind the scenes over the network, there's a conversation going on between your workstation and that other device. And when you connect to that device, it may spit out a good bit of information saying, oh, thanks for connecting to me. I'm server Cloudflare -Nginx. And here's the date. And I'm talking in text/HTML. And my connection is closed. And here's a cookie that expires on this day. And my cache control is a maxed age of 15. And this expires on this day. And here's something called CF. It's the Cloudflare array that they use as a unique connection identifier. It looks like I'm going through the Atlanta server. So the moment you connect to Messer Studios at ProfessorMesser.com, a bunch of stuff suddenly hits your computer. You don't see it, but it went across the network. And your browser sees it and decides how to respond to that for this. So this is what you would do to be able to make this work. It's always there. It's usually behind the scenes. Some servers are set up to be able to minimize the amount of information sent out. Because from here, I may be able to tell what version of web server software is in use. I can tell what web server software is in use. So all of these are certainly ways you can think about really focusing down on understanding what's going across the network and what somebody capturing packets would be able to see, or what somebody running certain tools like Telnet, NC, Nmap, or even exploitation framework software can find this information and do things with it. So this is one where focusing on the details is pretty important. People are picking nits with the fact that the banner grabbing is not a tool, but I didn't ask you specifically all of these to be tools. Steganography is not a tool. Honeypot's not a tool. Wireless cracking is not a tool. And exploitation framework software is not a tool either. So I guess none of these answers would be correct if we went down that road. The tool you're looking for is one that does banner grabbing. I think that was pretty straightforward. And most of you did as well. 65% of you said absolutely. That is the way that this would work. We need a tool that does banner grabbing. That's an easy thing to do. We'll use NC. We'll use Telnet to grab the banner. We just have to know what to type in. Something we do all the time to see if we're communicating to the right device across the network. One that does come in handy too. So if you've not done any banner grabbing before, really handy when you start doing troubleshooting of the network and find those and make them available. All of these questions we did today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you are studying for your Security Plus exam and you've never seen these before, you're doing yourself a disservice. You should absolutely download the latest version of the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have these, go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives SY0501 even if you want to. But just go to CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you to the CompTIA page. You can also go to ProfessorMesser.com/objectives. I'll redirect you right things over there for all of those pieces. And make sure you have them. They are extremely detailed. And people ask me all the time, what should I really be studying for this exam? You should really be studying everything that's listed here. CompTIA gives you everything they're going to ask about. Other manufacturers don't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Red Hat doesn't do this. Nobody does this but CompTIA. Take advantage of it to have all of those things there. It is a great way to have a big checklist that you can go through all of these pieces and really know what you want to do. Well, we've come to the end of an hour of Q&A. I'm going to do more Q&A, though, in the next hour. It'll just be ad hoc. You'll ask me questions. We'll play Stump the Security Professional. We'll see what happens. But I do one of these every month. And if you are watching this after January 23rd at 12 noon Eastern, then you may want to come back on February the 20th, where we have another one of these scheduled for 12 noon Eastern time. Of course, if this is even after February, you can always go out to professormesser.com/calendar. I do 2 A+ study groups, a Network Plus study group, and a Security Plus study group every month. So there are 4 live events scheduled. We're going to see if this works out okay. But at least 4 are scheduled. And by the way, you have the entire archive of study groups on my website. You can go back, listen to, and or watch every single one of them all the way through. They're just sitting there waiting for you. We certainly hope you do that and find all of those things there. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to open up the phone lines. I'm going to take questions from the chat room. I'm going to try to find that article that talked about the logic bomb that did not exist. We'll go through the details of that. But in the meantime, don't forget about my security course notes. They're at professormesser.com/securitycn. Please, oh please, subscribe to me on YouTube. I really can't grovel more than that. It does help quite a bit. So thank you for the folks that have done that at professormesser.com/YouTube. Twitter's there, professormesser.com/Twitter. Facebook's there. You just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you would like to find. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You'll find me. It's out there. We got it available to you. Stick around for the next hour. We'll do plenty more Q&A. We'll take your phone calls. We'll take questions from the chat room until you're just sick of me. And who doesn't want to do that? Thanks for joining us this time. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I get it. I have to go too. No, I don't. I have to stay here. There's things we're doing. So very quickly, let me bring up the phone line so that some of you can get dialed in while we're trying to find that article on the logic bomb that didn't happen, which happens all the time. Pardon me. We got to find that. I'm going to bring up This View's Good. You can look at my face while I am bringing up the call inside. So I get to call into my show as well. It's all in the cloud. And then you get to call in the show, and I'll tell you in just a moment how you can do that. In the meantime, I'm going to start up this so that I can hear it. There we go. And I'm going to call into my show so that I can talk to you. And it makes noise. There we go. Doom, doom, doom. Oh, you're welcome. I type in a few things on my screen and type a hashtag. Enter your 6-digit. Well, I'll do that if I can remember it, which is this and that and that and this. And it. Welcome. There we go. There. Yes, it's Skype. But Skype works great for this. And amazingly, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily work amazingly. Here is the phone number if you'd like to call in. It's area anywhere in the continental United States. You can call in for toll-free at 855-785-7545. We've got 855-785-7545. If you're calling in anywhere else, you can call in for free using Skype or anything that will call into a toll-free number without any cost by putting a +1 at the beginning so that it is recognized that it's the United States. That's our country code. +1 855-785-RJ45. +1 855-785-7545. And you'll be stuck in that queue. Just wait for the beeping noise, and you'll, of course, be able to find those pieces with all of that. So let me quickly see if I'm not done any prep for any of this to find the thing that I've been looking for. There was an order. There was an article earlier this past week that talked about logic bombs and what it was doing. It turned out it had nothing to do with a logic bomb. I'm trying to find it now. And of course, as I'm looking through it, I'm finding plenty of stories about actual logic bombs, but not the one I was looking for. It was a real challenge. And I say this all the time, is that if you see something written in the technical media I say technical media, the media, really just the media in general that talks about technical things. If you read through the articles that they write, they very rarely get all of the technical details properly. Have you ever read through an article that talked about something like security issues, technology, hard drives, talked about something technical, and you'll notice they kind of talk at a very high level, and then they don't talk about it at all after that. They don't go deep because they're journalists. They're not technical people, and they're trying to explain it to people who are not technical people. So that's where you really want to focus on, is really figuring out where do I trust, or how do I go through this? Well, you're not going to. Part of the challenges with the media in general is they try not to go too deep in this, which means you're left having to decipher all of those other pieces of this. So as we're talking and people are calling in, I'll try to find that article that talked about this particular piece of information. We can break that down and figuring out those details of this. So let's go back. Let's go to the phone lines then, and then other people that give me questions in the chat room as well. Please give me questions in the chat room as well. I'm watching this right here on my screen. Some folks are already asking questions about PGP. There's questions about other pieces. Oh, I didn't give a CEU, did I, for this first hour? I didn't provide you with a continuing education unit message. So let's do that. Let me, if you would like to earn a 1-hour webinar CEU for watching this, you can absolutely do that by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. And in that Contact Us link, give me your name, your email address. Tell me that this is the January 2019 Security Plus study group. That helps me find things in my list of magic words. And the magic word that we want to use in this particular month, let's use keylogger. I think that would be a good one that we can use. Let's use keylogger. So somewhere in the message, I'm reading these, by the way, manually. So you're welcome to put anything you'd like into the message itself. If you don't want to put anything, just put keylogger and send that to me. And I know that you must have at least watched up to now. I'm so sorry for watching up to now to be able to do that, but you did, and I'll give you credit for it. I'll send you back a digitally signed email that said, aha, you must have watched this. Here's 1 hour of credit, which actually CompTIA doesn't require that I do that, but I think it's nice to have proof. If they show up later and say, we're going to audit your continuing education unit credits, then that's something to have. I'm going to do a video, though, probably in the next week or so. It'll be out the next week, maybe sooner, that talks about how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certifications in just a few hours without doing any CEUs. So I'm talking about this like this is what you should do to renew. Actually, you should never use CEUs to renew. It's a waste of your time. It's not a waste. Some of you, it's actually normal. For a lot of people, you earn the CEUs just by the things you do every day. So that's obviously not a waste of time. But if you're getting close to renewal and you haven't done any of it yet, there's a problem. You're tight on time. So how do you renew in just a few hours? And you don't have to worry about collecting CEUs. That video will be out in a week. You'll see all of those. There's an easy way to do it. Let's first go to the phone calls. Let me make sure that I've got the phone calls up here. If you've been waiting on the line, I've got these phone calls ready to go. Let's go first to the 561 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah. Hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed calling from Miami Lakes.
It is Ed from Miami Lakes. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. How are things in the big town of Miami Lakes?
Oh, just fantastic.
They still have the bakery on Main Street?
The French bakery.
The French bakery. Oh, what a great place. Used to spend a lot of time there with the croissants and the coffee. And anyway, okay. Well, I can report back to Mrs. Professor Messer that the French bakery is alive and well. What can we do for you, Ed?
Well, I got a couple of questions. One, I was just wondering if you happen to know how many people currently have a Security Plus certification.
In fact, nobody but CompTIA knows. This is a kind of an interesting thing in the industry in general regarding certifications. It is a closely held private thing. Not only do they not promote generally how many people have a particular certification. They don't tell you how many people pass or fail. They don't give you those pass-fail rates. And they don't tell you, as you've probably seen, how they even grade it. The grading process itself is intentionally obfuscated, as you've seen, because for Security Plus and a number of other CompTIA exams, the range is between 100 and 900. Already that's weird. And then the passing score is 700 and something, depending on the exam you're taking, or even 600 and something. And they don't tell you how to get to that number. In fact, they don't even tell you necessarily if answering a question is good or bad. We've all just kind of figured out in the industry that getting a question wrong doesn't penalize or take any points away. We still believe that to be the case, but we don't know. And CompTIA doesn't share that, unfortunately, for better or worse.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that I took the Security Plus was my first test from CompTIA. I passed it my first time through, and I'm not from an IT background, so it was complicated. But from people that don't come from that background, you can still do it. I mean, it's not that it's not impossible, but you do have to study for it. There's no doubt about that.
It's not an easy exam. You can't walk in off the street. Even as someone like me who was in the security world for a number of years, for many, many years, working for security companies, it's not something I would have wanted to walk in off the street and sit down. It's such a broad exam that no matter what you're doing in the security world, there are plenty of topics on the exam that are talking about things you probably don't touch day to day. And as you mentioned, it's a relatively complex exam. The questions are worded in a way that you really have to read them very, very carefully. It's almost like a reading comprehension exam in some ways. But I'm glad you were able to get through it. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have another question for you. Most of the attacks that happen on networks affect operating systems. Mm-hmm. And it appears that, companies can go a year almost without realizing that they've been breached.
Yep.
And been hacked. And I was wondering, is it possible to catch something like that through a hashing process? Can you hash an operating system to see if the software has changed at all from one day to the next?
Oh, sure. In fact, we do that today in a very specific way. The idea that you're mentioning, obviously, the bad guys are going after the operating systems because everybody has one. It's a very, very popular attack vector because there are certain applications, of course, the bad guys will go after. They'll go after WordPress. They'll go after Microsoft Word. They'll go after these very, very popular applications, but not everybody's running WordPress. Not everybody's using Microsoft Word, but everybody is using some operating system. And that's why in the BIOS of our operating systems, many years ago, Intel and many of the other motherboard manufacturers and operating system manufacturers got together and said, how can we make this so that rootkits can never, ever infect our systems again? And what they created was Secure Boot, that function in a UE5 BIOS that when you boot up your computer, your BIOS will check the operating system on your computer and check the digital signature of the kernel and the critical files that make up the base part of your operating system. So this happens very quickly. It checks those files, and if the digital signature matches what the BIOS expects it to be, it boots your system. Now, if those numbers, if something got in and modified the kernel of Windows, your BIOS would stop and say, the secure boot process has failed. We've identified a file that no longer matches the digital signature, and we're not booting the system. So that functionality exists even today in the BIOS of our systems.
Okay, that's great. And I just wanted to mention one other thing before I go. I don't know if you have Netflix or not, but there's a show on there called Pine Gap. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not at all.
Fantastic show. Your listeners might enjoy that if they have Netflix. Pine Gap is one of the three major listening posts throughout in the world. It's part of the Five Eyes, which is, intelligence community from the United States, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And they share intelligence communication. Right, there you go. And anyways, what's fantastic about the show is not only is it about signal intelligence, but also there is a mole inside, and they're trying to exfiltrate data on an air-gapped facility. And they talk about how they were able to do that. So it's very interesting.
This may be one of those situations like they do with Mr. Robot, where they're actually extremely accurate with the security type of technology they're talking about. You've probably seen lots of examples. A good one on the YouTube is Enhance. Well, they're looking at a camera and they'll say, enhance that section, and suddenly they're able to get this crystal clear picture, which never seems to work in the real world. But shows like this, I love, that spend the time getting the right kind of security and implementing it properly in the plot. From somebody who's like me, my wife gets tired. When we're watching something, they go, that wouldn't happen. But when they get it right, and I tell her, oh, that's totally how that would happen, we're all surprised.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, check out that show. It's awesome.
I will. I've got it now marked, and I will see what that's about. I watch very little television, so anything that I pull up and say, why don't we watch something? Let's watch Mrs. Professor Messer's mouth fall agape, and she'll wonder, what? You want to watch TV? We'll see. I bet she'll like that. We'll have to see how that goes.
Okay, I'll check back with you and see if you enjoyed it.
Appreciate it, Ed. Thanks for the call.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
That's there's also, by the way, ways to watch, not just I mentioned how we have a way to watch the operating system files, the core operating system files, and have our BIOS look for changes. There's also ways to do this in software on servers. One very common one is called Tripwire, where you can tell the Tripwire to watch certain files of your system, and if any of those change, perform some function, block it, inform you, whatever it happens to be. There's lots of ways to do that. Not just, I didn't want people to think there's only one way to do it. There's many ways to do it, and many pieces of software that can make that happen. Very quickly, before I go back to the calls, excuse me, somebody was mentioning about PGP keys. If you make a key pair and publish it to key servers attached to a specific email address, can someone use my public key and email a different address for me, and I'll still be able to decrypt it? Yes, they will. You will still be able to decrypt it as long as you have, of course, the private key associated with the public key they encrypted it with. We put the emails in the servers when we publish our key, put the email so that people who know your email would be able to find your key easily. But of course, they could search by first name and last name. You may find the first name and last name, but not the right email address. But it's it's the public key that they're using to encrypt it. It's the most important part. As long as you have the key, the private side of that key, you're going to do fine. Back to the phones. We're going to go to 773. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Joe Davish from Chicago.
Welcome, Chicago. How are you, sir? What can we do for you?
Professor Messer, I'd like to know, is it possible to simulate a kind of a bad situation in your system just to test your defense against all kind of attacks? Number one. Number two, doesn't they, using Linux as an operating system desktop would protect you from all these issues that, daily, it happens every day, people try to get your system and try to do some damage. Using Linux, would that protect you from many of these issues? I appreciate your answer, and I really enjoy your show. Thank you, sir.
I thank you, sir. There's lots of different ways to try to attack your system, or to attack your system in ways to see what it can do. One of the things a lot of people will do is perform their own attacks on their own system using something like Metasploit, or they'll use some other type of attack software to be able to, maybe they'll use a vulnerability checker to be able to check your system and see how it reacts. That can be a challenge, not just in you knowing how to operate the attacking software, but you don't know exactly how your system may react to that either. And if your system is being used to store important files, if it's a production system, if you're at work, You can't necessarily do that against that system. That's why a lot of people will use a virtual machine and they'll attack a virtual machine. That's a very easy way to do it. There are a number of vulnerable virtual machines out there on the internet to choose from. I demonstrate this in a number of my videos where I'm showing you the exploits. I'll find this. There is a web app that you can download called DVWA, a damn vulnerable web application. And boy, it sure is. And it runs either as a separate executable on your system, or it runs as a virtual machine. You can download virtual machines for this. So it's an application that you can use that you already know is vulnerable, and it even gives you examples of how you can exploit it. And then you can try different exploitation methods through Metasploit, through third-party software. That might be a good way to try out. If you're trying to figure out, how do I do a buffer overflow? How can I do a SQL injection? Well, it's right here in this app. This app is so vulnerable, it will allow you to perform a SQL injection. It will allow you to do a cross-site scripting attack, and it shows you even how to do it. Now, the question you had about people using Linux as a way to have a system that's more secure is not incorrect, but it's not exactly spot on with the idea of having a secure system. There is certainly exploits that are in Linux. There are exploits in Mac OS. There are exploits in Windows. Now, the total number of exploits attacking those systems is a vast number of them are on the Windows side, because Windows has the largest number of systems out in the world, and the bad guys like to attack the low-hanging fruit. So as people say in the chat room, it's supply and demand. They're not going to spend a lot of time going after an operating system that's going to give them a lower return. Instead, they're going to attack the things that will give them the most possible return. That said, there are absolutely exploits in Linux. There's absolutely exploits in Mac OS. There's exploits in everything. In every operating system ever created, there's an exploit there. The challenge, of course, is having the right security layered on those systems to be able to prevent those exploits from causing an attack to hit you. So that's what you want to do. There are, and people think that Mac OS it's completely invulnerable to these attacks, and Linux is completely invulnerable to these attacks. It's not. It's just that the number of attacks available to those operating systems is much lower. So don't be thrown by this. You're a little bit safer by using Linux, but only in the total number of possibilities. If a bad guy finds one vulnerability in your system, it's now vulnerable. It's a binary situation. Somebody's either exploited your system or they haven't. And it doesn't matter that there's only one possible exploit for your operating system. Well, that doesn't matter if they know what that is and they attack you. It's one of those situations where statistics are great unless you're part of the problems. You're one of those numbers. People will say that, you have such a slim chance of this ever happening. Unless it happens to you, then it was 100% chance that it happened to you. So that's a good way to think about it, especially when you consider if moving operating systems makes you more secure. That should not be the reason you move operating systems. You should be using the operating system that works best for what you're doing. There's plenty of ways to make Windows secure. There are plenty of ways to make Linux secure. There are plenty of ways to make Mac OS secure. You should find the one that works for you for the right reason.
Wonderful. Professor, also, as you know, Microsoft is going to unplug the support for Windows 7 by end of, I believe, year 2020.
What?
Would that cause Windows 2007?
That's right.
Anymore?
Yep.
And then, don't you think this is going to cause a lot of problem for people, for companies, and the type of operations they have, the software they have? How are they going to deal with it, do you think? What is the best way to deal with that? Because, so many software maybe are not written for Windows 10.
I would agree. I was visiting a relative in a hospital recently. And, of course, hospitals, they have these terminals everywhere next to the bed, in the hallways. The nurses are using these. The doctors are using these. The phlebotomists are using these. The x-ray techs are using these. They're all over the place. Every single one of them was running Windows 7. And I was thinking the same thing, that, well, I hope they have a plan to do their upgrade to these systems. But imagine in a hospital the complexities of applications that they have to work with, and the changing a single operating system to, let's assume they're going to go from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Imagine the amount of work that it's going to take to do all of the testing necessary in an environment like a hospital. Because if a problem happens with that operating system in a hospital, there are people's lives at risk. It's not like here in my studio. If my operating system has a problem, then I can't browse the internet and nobody cares. It doesn't hurt anybody and nobody dies. But in a hospital, you got a lot of concerns about this. And it's the same thing for a lot of different companies. If their systems stop working, the company doesn't work anymore. The company may have financial problems. You might have it. There's all kinds of issues associated with that. So just switching operating systems is a very planned out process. It's a very time consuming process. There's a big project. There's tons of people involved. There's application developers. There are people in every part of the business. They're all involved. They have to do all this testing, and it takes months and months and months to do that. Now, that said, absolutely companies are planning for these transitions. Everybody at all of these companies know they're going to have to go to Windows 10. And at this point, a lot of us have already moved from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and we sort of know what to expect. It's not like it's an unknown at this point. A lot of the bugs with Windows 10, well, some of the bugs with Windows 10 have been eradicated, and they've got it out of the operating system. It's a relatively stable environment to work with at this point. And I think a lot of companies are going to have to keep working to make that transition because, as you've said, we can't stick around Windows 7 very long. I was going to bring up on my side, how many people coming to my website are still using Windows 7 and Windows 10? And it looks like Google Analytics is not up and running for me right now. So we'll have to, oh wait, I did get Google Analytics. So while we're talking about this, I'm going to give you an idea. And this, of course, is a very broad perspective of the demographics of what people are using here. But let's see what operating systems are in use by the people hitting my website, let's just say over the last 30 days. Not even, let's say the last 30 days. So let's go a month, the data range, last 30 days. And let's look at this real quick. And let's see if it's a big a problem as we think it is. I think that's what we want to find out. So let me click on operating system and give you a perspective. So the people hitting my site over, let's just look at Windows. And for my site, 60% of the people coming to my site are using Windows. So of that 60%, 73% of them are running Windows 10, 21% of them are running Windows 7. So I think your concerns are spot on that over 20% of the population, of course, these are just people coming to my site. This is not a very good representation of the world in general. That's a pretty big number. That's at least those 20% of people need to move to a newer operating system before that operating system stops receiving security updates. By the way, interestingly enough, Windows 8.1 is 3% of the traffic of my site, and I'm rounding up to the nearest percentage. Windows 8.4%, not even 1%, not even 0.5%. Windows 8. Windows Vista, 1.5%. More people coming to my site are running Windows Vista than Windows 8. That's scary enough for all of us. And by the way, 0.15 running Windows XP. You're spot on, sir. Your concerns are absolutely validated, I think.
Wonderful, Professor. You're a treasure to all of us. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You're very kind, sir. Thank you so much for calling. I think you're a treasure as well. Just the fact you call in makes me happy to have that there. Let's do another call. 509, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Tony. I'm calling from Spokane, Washington.
Welcome, Tony. What can we do for you?
Hey, so I went through for like some kind of like job retrain kind of thing. We went through A plus, Network plus, and Security plus. I'm like, great, okay. So I shelved Network plus because that one's like my like veteran security consultant guy who was teaching it was like, yeah, like just that's one of the hardest ones. So I was like, okay, we'll go Security plus right now. And Security plus, I'm looking at it going, I thought like whenever I look at a job, I thought, okay, great, I'll be able to get a job in some kind of security, like security analyst, security, network security engineer, infosec,
Right.
things like that. But and like whenever I look at positions with that, they're like, oh, wants a job using like SIM software, network analysis, like your Wireshark, which I do know how to use, but like Wireshark, doing baselining and none of that's covered in Sec Plus. And so I'm going, what I'm trying to understand is like when I went through A plus, it's like this is all about computers, man. If I understand computers, I can like put that into a compartment and walk into the test going, I know what this is. Network plus, all about networking. I can put this into a compartment, I walk in the test, and I know what this is about. Security plus is like, man, we're talking about risk management, we're talking about vulnerability assessments, we're talking about all over the things, kind of just this like broad spectrum of kind of stuff, but none of it is for any of the jobs that I was looking at getting. Like, can you tell me, like, especially with your background, like, what am I looking for goodness sakes?
I'll give you the perspective from someone who's been working with these certification exams for years and years and years, going back to, this is a 501, 401, I did a 301 video series. So we're talking about at least 9 years of videos on just the courses, but also someone who has been a systems engineer for McAfee Network Associates and someone who's been a systems engineer for Network General, someone who's been a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks doing firewalls. So I talk to people. My job was getting on a plane, getting in a car, going to a company and talking to their security department, and usually talking to 3 or 4 different companies in a single day. So I feel like I've got a pretty good perspective on what people are doing with security in these larger security departments. In some cases, what are the biggest companies in the world? I was in the Southeast United States, the Eastern U.S., and in some cases going to talk to people in around the world, in Europe, in Australia, and talking to them about what they're doing, what their needs are, what their challenges are, and the things they're trying to do for security in their company. And people, I mentioned this earlier, and I don't remember if it was in the pre-show or the beginning of the show, where I think it was the pre-show, we were talking about Pen Test Plus and some of these very, very niche certifications that in reality don't correlate back to what companies are looking for from a security role. So let's take a step back. Now, that being kind of giving you a perspective of what I've seen in the people I've worked with, security is huge. Security is a broad scope of different jobs in different companies doing vastly different things. I've worked, for instance, when I worked at Palo Alto Networks, I was a systems engineer talking with people about implementing next generation firewalls. How do we design it into their system? What's the process for implementing it? Let's do the actual implementation. Let's configure the rules on the firewall. Sort of a soup to nuts for making that technology work. There were other people working in my company who were more on the computer science side, but definitely a security role that would take viruses and malware. They would deconstruct them. They would look at them at the machine code level, figure out what they were doing, and then write software and signatures to be able to block those in the firewall. Those two jobs I just described, me implementing a firewall and somebody writing code and signatures to block malware by looking at machine code, are two vastly different jobs, and well, they should be, because the guy writing software and code has no interest in going down to these customers and putting firewalls in and talking to them about network design. And I got to tell you, I have no interest in writing code and signatures and trying to figure out all of that piece, because both of those are vastly different. You need different people with different mindsets, with different ways of thinking to do those jobs. You can't mash those together and say, well, that's security. No, those are completely different animals in the way they operate. And of course, there's many jobs in between all of that. There are people that handle support on these things. There's people that are writing the code for the firewall. There are people that are designing the next generation of the next generation at the higher level. All of these are security jobs, but none of them have anything to do with each other. You would not be able to take me out of my role and put me into any one of those other roles. That wouldn't work for anybody. Nobody would be happy. Security Plus focuses mostly on IT security department, the operational security side of things. These are the people that are in the IT security department that handle the management of the firewalls, intrusion prevention. They set up VPN connections between sites. They configure the multi-factor authentication methods being used by the organization. They make sure that the applications are able to communicate through all of these security systems they have in place. They do the auditing to make sure their security is working properly. They probably have a SIM, so they take all of the logs from all of these switches and routers and firewalls and bring them down into one place. In some cases, they have a stream to disk solution for network traffic itself, so they're physically capturing every bit and byte going through the network and out to the internet and saving it on this vast array of multi-terabyte drives. It's such a broad scope just in that one department. That's where Security Plus focuses, on that particular role in the organization. Will there be other people in the organization that deal with compliance? Yes. Will there be other people in the organization, maybe a separate auditing group? Yep, probably. Do some organizations have their own pen testing group that do sort of the red team type things on the network? Yes, they do. In some cases, they're separate people in a separate department, but they still all work in the same company. These are the large, huge, multi-billion-dollar multinational organizations. But Security Plus is really focused on that core group of people that are just keeping the data safe and making sure that all of those systems and technologies they put in place are working the way you would expect them to work. Security Plus sometimes goes outside the scope of that. There is one slide in Security Plus on Wireshark. But there's many more slides on Security Plus that talk about log files. So that gives you some perspective on where they're coming from. If I had to point somebody in a direction who's getting Security Plus, that's the job you're working towards, is that IT security role and being able to keep data safe.
Okay, and that actually dovetails. Thank you very much. That, by the way, that really dovetails into the follow-up question I have is like, so if you're looking to hire somebody and you're going, oh man, I need somebody with a Security Plus certification because I have a what job that's open, would that be an analyst of sorts, or would that be like a network security engineer or something like that?
It would be the role that most people describe in those IT security groups is an IT security analyst, an IT security engineer. People are using the term cybersecurity a lot over the last 3 years, which has no meaning whatsoever. So I don't tend to use that term. It doesn't apply. It doesn't describe anything. We don't have a cyber to secure, so I'm not sure why we'd have a cybersecurity person. We need more detail. The way it works in most of these organizations, and again, my perspective is visiting and talking to these people, is that the people in security have moved up into that role from having a previous position that was very focused on networking. And that's because IT security has such an important foundation in networking. If you're connecting a firewall to the network, you're probably getting redundant systems. You're connecting into a redundant set of routers and switches that already exist. Are you using a redundant set of protocols for your firewalls? Is it a active-active where both firewalls are active at the same time? Is it active-passive where one of the firewalls is active and it fails over? There's completely different engineering and completely different design considerations for either one of those things. And not just sort of different, dramatically different design concerns for that. How does it work with your existing redundant routers and switch configurations? Are we going to be putting this in a layer 3 where the firewall is doing routing? Are you going to have a separate router and the firewall is going to be sort of in a layer 1 mode where you are a bump on the wire? Those are the types of questions that have to be answered. And by the way, you notice none of that had anything to do with security. That was all about engineering how you plug it into the network. Same thing applies for IPsec. Same thing applies for implementing a SIM solution, which also requires that you have some knowledge with operating systems and probably some knowledge with a small level of scripting or programming to be able to build out the reports that you need. So usually people are not getting entry-level positions into security. People are usually being hired internally or externally from a position that's already technical. They were in a network analyst position or network engineer position for an amount of time. They're now ready to move into a security role. We're going to take their network knowledge. We're going to layer on top of that the security piece, and now they're in a security role. This is sort of the challenge I do run into on my site, is that people say, I got my security plus, I'm ready for my security job. And I have to say, well, wait, that's not what Security Plus is for you. Security Plus is that layer that goes on top of the networking side of things. What networking foundation do you have? Don't have any, just want a security job, but there's very, very few entry-level security jobs available out there. That doesn't mean there aren't any, because I have talked to people who did get an entry-level security job in their group. It's remarkably rare. It's a little more common than it used to be because there's not enough people for security jobs these days. We're starting to hire wherever we can, and we'll train people as we go. But the most common way to get a job in IT security is to move there from a job that already has a strong foundation in networking.
Excellent. That was one of the questions I was coming up against in the last couple months of looking around for jobs. Was there's not really much in the entry level. Whenever they post a security job, they're like 3 to 5 years experience,
yep,
plus XYZ. And I was like, okay, so if a good place to start with that is to couple with network plus networking analyst degree, experience, I guess, and then start building security into that, because you can still use security concepts, yep, I believe, in a networking role.
Oh, yes.
And then at that point, then you can say, oh yeah, I have experience doing that because I had a network engineer job. Okay,
everybody's doing
and that
security.
Helps a ton. Thank you.
Your folks that are in charge of your file servers have a layer of security on top of it. The networking team has a layer of security on top of it. And of course, all of these things are going to flow in. My role, my path went from a corporate environment where I was a network administrator to working for a company that made network analysis software and really started to understand the network at a packet level. That allowed me to write a book on Nmap, which eventually gave me the knowledge I needed for somebody to take a chance on me for a security job. So it was this path, it was this step up to finally get into that security role. And even today, I'm not sure they really wanted to hire me, but they did anyway, and it worked out. So that's it. The path is going to be different for everybody, and I realize that. But almost always, when I'm looking at the people in the room in those security departments, it became a very familiar group of people, because 5 years ago, these were the same people I was going to visit with my sniffer and tell them about stream to disk technology, and they were working in the network team. Now I'm walking in the door, and they're on the security team. Like, it's the same group. Nothing changed. These are the same people that I've known all this time. They're just now have moved from networking to security. It's a common path.
That's super cool. Well, thank you so much, man. That's awesome. That helps a lot.
Great. Thanks for the call, Tony.
Yep.
That's it. It's one where, and I hate to sometimes do it, but people come to the site and they say, I've got my Security Plus. Where do I get that job? Like, you shouldn't have, that's not why you should have taken the Security Plus. There's a lot of good reasons to take the Security Plus, and certainly it will help when you combine it with all the other things you need, but it's very difficult to find those entry-level security positions. Such a challenge to do that. And I mentioned this also for those of you listening that are getting jobs with the federal government, the U.S. federal government. At a minimum, one of the minimum certifications you have to have with the U.S. federal government, ironically enough, Security Plus. So they don't even care if you have A+ or Network Plus. If you're doing anything from a technical perspective in IT with the U.S. federal government or working for a partner of the U.S. federal government, they expect you to have Security Plus at a bare minimum. There's also some other ones that are compatible, but that's one of the very common ones people have. So a lot of people come to my site to get Security Plus because their job requires them to have it at a bare minimum. That's a little bit of a corner case, a little bit of an unusual situation, but it's one that does come up from time to time. 559, thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor.
Hello. Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Omakolade, and I'm calling from Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah.
What can we do for you?
Okay. I've been enjoying the whole program, and I've learned so many things, even from the previous callers. So here goes my questions.
Okay.
First of all, I'm about taking my Security Plus. So, and my plan is to, come up with a home lab that I can use to practice.
Great.
And up my skills, like creating an Active Directory, bring up a server, a web server using IIS on Apache and on Nginx.
Great.
And all sort of skills like that. So my target is to be able to build my CV, and after that go for a higher certification, which by that time I know how I would have been very proficient in a whole lot of security aspects. So I don't know if there is anything you can add as an advice for me going forward. And the other question I would like to ask is that I was going to talk about the CEUs, the continuing education credits, but since you said you're gonna publish some videos about it,
yes.
So we can easily renew our certifications. So that would be good, and I will be looking forward to that as well. That would be all. Thank you.
Absolutely. The idea of building a home lab is a great idea. If you don't have anyone listening, if you don't have a home lab, and I mean a home lab doesn't have to be a 40U rack with tons of equipment in it and it's making a lot of noise and using a lot of power, that doesn't necessarily mean a home lab. Even just virtual machines running on your computer is an amazing set of home lab equipment. There's plenty of software available. You mentioned Windows. I went out to the Microsoft website just so people can see the evaluation center on the Microsoft website. You can download Windows Server 2019, Hyper-V, Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2012 R2. There's plenty of tools and software available on the Microsoft website to download a server, try out Active Directory, try configuring some accounts, try connecting those accounts from other systems. And that's just the server side of things. The other thing I will tell people, if you go to modern.ie, modern being not the antiquated, but the modern.ie, is a website for developers that are building software for workstations. So from their site, they have a tools pull-down menu with virtual machines where you can select Windows 7, Windows 8.1, or Windows 10 and download a virtual machine. Let's choose Windows 10 for VirtualBox, Vagrant, VMware, Hyper-V, and Parallels. So you can download the version of the virtual machine for you, and instantly you now have a Windows machine that you can run some lab equipment on. In fact, the only thing you can do with this is run it as a lab system. It's designed and licensed only for use as a non-production system. But Microsoft says, other than that, use it however you would like. That's a great thing to get just operating systems going. Go ahead.
All right. I was going to cut you off for a moment there. Okay. That's modern.id.
It's MODERN, modern.ie, as an Internet Explorer.
Oh, that's great. I got that now. My other question, as regards to the lab, what So okay, I think getting a high-end machine that could run a VM with a quite number of VMs effectively, I think that would be good to bring up
Oh,
a
yes.
home lab. Would
Oh,
that
yeah.
be good, sir?
Yep.
All right.
And in fact, this may be a
All right.
place where you can not only have the operating systems, but you may want to get other types of software like intrusion prevention systems or PFSense firewall software, especially if you're studying for Security Plus, where you can set up your workstations on one side of the network, put the firewall in the middle, and have a server on the other side and start sending traffic between them and watch the logs in the firewall, set rules in the firewall, and then see how you're able to run Windows through this firewall and get reports.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna do that. And I don't know if there are some other things you would suggest I do on these labs. I've read about bringing up a DNS server and all sorts of things like that.
Yep.
I don't know if there is a compilation of things I should be able to do. In upping my skills.
It would be worth my time to make something like this because, for instance, you mentioned building a Windows server and working with DNS or working with Active Directory. But to be able to do that and have other workstations interact with Active Directory, a DNS is critical. In fact, Microsoft Windows Server comes with DNS software already running because they know that if you're setting up this Active Directory server, other workstations can't find the Active Directory server unless they query the proper DNS settings in your DNS server. So you're right, all of these things build on each other, and you end up finding the interrelationship between all of those to be able to work. But there's plenty of things that you could do in a lab to make this work. You have software that you can use to gather statistics from routers and switches with SNMP. You have log aggregation that you can do using syslog and then create reports from that syslog data using free software that's out there. I really should put through a list of things that would be interesting to see in a home lab for someone who's trying to, from the bare bones, figure out how to make all of these things work together. I won't give you the step-by-steps, but I'd say if I was building a home lab, here's the type of things I would put in there or I have put in there in the past to be able to try out the software and see how it works. I think that'd be worth some time.
All right, sir. And after doing all these things, after helping my skills and being proficient in all these security skills,
That's the only way you're going to be able to do it.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I say that's really the only way you're going
that.
to be able to do it.
All right, that would be great. And my last question will be, after all these things, and I'll be looking to, getting a higher certification after Security Plus, which can get me a good job. Could you please suggest any?
Are you thinking about an additional what jobs you would be getting, or are you looking at what you can add on to Security Plus?
I didn't get that. Can you please comment?
I think this is sort of the global response, and I talked a little bit about this in the last call. If you're looking for a job in security, you want to have more of a role in a security environment, working with the firewalls, intrusion prevention, the multi-factor authentication, the IPsec VPNs, the reporting, all those things I mentioned earlier, and you want a role like that, the best advice I can give anybody is to go get a strong foundation in networking. That if you haven't been working with switches and routers, and these days, I guess that really means you're not familiar with Cisco switches or Cisco routers. If you've not got any hands-on on routers and switches and understanding the underlying technologies behind routers and switches, then you won't be able to jump right into a security role very easily. The more you know about networking, the more you know about getting on a switch and working with port security and understanding VLANs and connecting up redundant switches and being able to manage the routers and the VRRP and the BGP protocols or the EIGRP. If all of those things I just mentioned don't make any sense, then you should spend some time so that they do make sense, so that you can set up a lab, connect these devices together. And if I was going to put together a home lab, Packet Tracer would be one of those, by the way, which is a free piece of software from Cisco where you can build out an enormous router and switch network, connect it all together, and make it work in a matter of minutes just by dragging and dropping software around. You don't need physical hardware. You could learn more from Packet Tracer just running on a laptop than someone working in an enterprise with physical equipment could ever do, because you can reconstruct and move things around in an instant with Packet Tracer and build things out instantly in a matter of seconds that would normally take you minutes or even hours to do with physical hardware. That's from a networking perspective, that's a powerful start into understanding routing and switch technologies.
All right, sir. That will be all. Thanks a lot. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
I appreciate the call. That's one of the best things you can do for security perspective is get your networking knowledge really honed up. That's going to make a big difference. Whenever we would do interviews, I was one of the first systems engineers hired at Palo Alto Networks to be able to go out and talk to people about this technology. And so we started ramping up, and we started hiring more people. And so we would do interviews to hire more systems engineers. The first questions we would ask weren't about security. We were asking about networking. I have one systems engineer manager that I worked with in the Northeast. His first question always was, tell me everything you know about ARP and the different kinds of ARP. Not a security question. That's a pure networking question. Does it have hooks into security? Yes, it does. Certainly proxy ARP certainly does. When would you use that? How would you use it? What does it mean? Where do you see it? What problems come from that? The more someone knows about that, the more you can understand where they've been with security, interestingly enough. It is a great question. And I always like, you put some thought into this, because that's a great question. What is reverse ARP? Where do you see that these days? Some of these are trick questions to do that. But we always started with the networking piece. From there, we would blend in the security piece. So it would always work from there. 609, thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Wayne. I am calling from New Jersey.
Welcome, Wayne.
Yes, sir. My question had to do more with the 8+.
Okay, sure.
It's just with what avenues can I use to try and get a discount? I know if you have an EDU email account, you can apply and get a voucher for like $100 off. But I actually graduated, and I no longer have that EDU account. Any other ways around that?
Not a lot. So let's back up and talk about the best possible discount is the one that's not available to you anymore, because you have to have an EDU email address. And this is from the CompTIA Academic Marketplace. If you go to the Google machine, you type in CompTIA Academic Store or CompTIA Academic Marketplace, it will bring you to the site. It allows you to get certification vouchers that are significantly discounted. For example, an A+ voucher that normally is much more expensive to buy without this. You can see the price there for US dollars, $100 for the A+, $215 for Security Plus. So you are saving, in some cases, $100 to be able to do this. But you have to have an EDU email address. I think the terms of this is that it is your EDU email address. They want this to be one that you have as an EDU email address. Now, I can also tell you they don't have a way to link back your name with the voucher that was purchased. There's no way to do that, because your email address might be 74xww7@school.edu. They have no way to really pull that back to your name. So technically speaking, anyone can buy these and use them. This is why I'm trying to find it on the page. There are significant limitations to how many certifications can be purchased this way in a certain time frame. and a limitation on the total number of certifications that can be purchased by a particular EDU email address in a lifetime. So there are limitations there, and I think technically CompTIA wants to see you having the EDU email address. There are some schools, as people are mentioning in the chat room, where even after you've graduated, you still get access to your old email address. So you may want to call into the school to see if maybe there's a benefit as being a graduated alumni that maybe you're not even aware of that you may be able to take advantage of for this. Now, for those of you like me that you're a long way away from an EDU email address, that's something that doesn't apply in your world anymore. But it has to be, by the way, EDU. It can't be for a school outside the United States that does not use EDU. They're very specific with that particular discount. So you have to make sure that you have that. For everywhere else, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm also going to be taking the CCNA. Do you recommend studying for both at the same time, or study for one, get that, and then move on to the next one?
Are you referring to the pair of exams, the ICND1 and the ICND2, or taking the CCNA combined exam? Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, no. The A+ and the CCNA.
The CCNA, first, the CCNA by itself, I think unless you are somebody who is incredibly knowledgeable of Cisco technologies and you've been a network administrator for years and you know this stuff cold, I would not take the combined CCNA exam. I recommend to everybody taking these to take the two exams that make up the CCNA routing and switching, which is the ICND1 and the ICND2. They're two separate exams. They are really detailed, difficult, complex, time-consuming, and arduous exams. They are not simple exams to take. They are light years away from A+ or Network Plus. They are designed to be light years away. They are a completely different style and category of exam because that's what they are designed to be. The A+ exam in itself is an incredibly broad exam by the scope of the fact that it's two exams to begin with, is very broad. I would never recommend somebody to study for both A+ and the two Cisco CCNA routing and switching exams simultaneously, unless you're just not sleeping, you have no plans to eat for that time frame, you're not doing anything else with your life, you wake up, you study, you go to bed, and if that's all you're doing, but none of us are that way. I would recommend focusing on one of the A+ exams, study everything, get it down, pass that exam, and only then shift your gears over to the exam objectives for the second A+ exam. And only after passing that one would I ever shift my focus onto another one. You're asking for a lot if broadly you want to study for both A+ and CCNA simultaneously. Not my first recommendation, no, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, El Professore. Have a great day.
Thanks, Wayne. You too. That's an easy one for me. I look at trying to just take one of those exams. How am I supposed to do that in my life? That's crazy. 951, thank you for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Stefan. I'm calling from California.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
I actually have a question that's more in line with the Network Plus, as that's the exam I'm studying for right now.
Oh, sure. It's open phone lines. Any question?
Sweet. I am running into an issue with exams or practice exams that are covering various types of material, and in particular, I'm talking about VLANs. I was curious to ask you, what are some of the best practices for securing VLANs that are maybe on their own or chunked together? The reason I ask this is because sometimes on the practice exams, they'll give one way to secure a VLAN, but they won't give ways for legacy systems or older methods to do so on some of the practice exams that I've come across. So I was just curious to know if you knew of any best practices that are modern in which people do secure these VLANs nowadays.
I don't. First, I'm not even sure technically what that means, secure a VLAN. So was there any scope to this? This is, by the way, not an unusual set of questions I get often to my inbox or the chat that's on the website 24/7, is that people do run across some of these questions where they ask, which of these is the best way to secure a VLAN? And I'm looking at like, what in the world are you talking about? What is there something? There's no context to it. There's no scope. Is there more information there that perhaps we just don't have access to?
That's unless it's not being given in the question. Sometimes it's based on a scenario. The question might say, there's a network administrator putting together a network that's going to have two segmented VLANs, but it's the best way to secure these two, and then secure both VLANs or both networks. And I'm like, what? And they'll give a multiple choice question of either different protocols or they'll give a methodology to use, like I don't know, like some sort of load balancing with another firewall.
Wow.
So I'm
okay.
not sure if I was asking what is the good best practice that most people use when they're setting up a network, I guess, with VLANs.
I suspect, and I'm trying to think back to the Network Plus exam objectives, but I suspect the question is trying to take you to a response that has something to do with VLAN tagging or VLAN hopping. There's something there. Those are the two VLAN security techniques or vulnerabilities, if you will, that are described in the Network Plus exam objectives that have to do with VLANs. Because most of the time, one VLAN has no idea what's happening on another VLAN. And there's no way for those two VLANs to touch each other unless you put a router in the middle of them somewhere, wherever that router happens to be. And sometimes that router is also a firewall. Sometimes people will put in, these days modern firewalls are put in that can separate VLANs or can even firewall between separate devices on the same VLAN. You can get very granular these days with security between systems. But for very broad scope, if somebody's talking about VLAN security, they're probably talking about preventing VLAN hopping or one of those other security techniques that's listed in the Network Plus exam objectives. The problem is a lot of these questions are sometimes written by people who don't know anything about networking. They're trying to build it based on a book they read. Here's a Network Plus book, and it talks about VLAN hopping, and this is a way to help make VLANs more secure. So they'll write a question, which of these techniques makes VLANs more secure? Without any scope of understanding that, that's a crazy question that has no scope and it's very broad. It has no context. And unless you know they were looking at an article that talked about VLAN hopping, you wouldn't know that they were talking about VLAN hopping, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. That's kind of, you just highlighted exactly what I'm seeing on a lot of the exams. Just, a very general or vague question. And it's like, well, I have all these possibilities and most of these could be correct rather than one being correct or correct for a certain scenario. The
CompTIA exam is very specific. They give you a scenario that in the question itself is telling you the limitations they're putting on this particular response that they're wanting. They're really giving you key information, and the answers that they provide will have a absolute context back to the question that they're asking. We didn't used to have this, by the way, in CompTIA exams. CompTIA exams used to be all over the place. They've done a very good job at building questions out for their exam now that they may be a lot of words, and it might be quite a story that you have to read, but the story is spot on with the answer that they're looking for, and they will give you the context. If they're looking for VLAN hopping, they're going to explain in the question that they want to prevent somebody from adding on additional tags inside of a frame that would allow somebody to jump around to a VLAN where they were not allowed. What would we be preventing? The answer would be VLAN hopping. So that's the type of thing that they're trying to get across. But they'll be very specific. You won't see questions on the exam that are that vague where you just aren't sure what in the world they're talking about. The people on the actual exam are spot on. And sometimes it's frustrating because some people will comment on a news group or a Reddit or on a Discord and say, this CompTIA exam's awful. And what they really mean is the questions that they're reading are awful. They haven't even gotten to the exam part. The exams will be much better, I promise you.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you for.
Oh, and I hung up. I'm so sorry. Hung up on. You're welcome for whatever that was. You're welcome. You're welcome. I do appreciate it though. It is very motivational. I will tell you that. Some folks have done very nice things over the past week, and it really does make you want to get into this room and shoot more video. So I do appreciate that. I'm so sorry I hung up on you. Back to the calls, the 312 area code. Hello, caller. Which name we're calling from?
Hello. Yeah, hi, I'm calling from Chicago.
Chicago. How are you, sir? What can we do?
Pretty good, man. I got ADD and I went through all that, too. Yeah, so I'm studying for, like, the ICND 1, and I've been studying for, like, 3 months.
Sounds okay.
You know, I'm having a tough time. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. ICD-1, you've been studying 3 months.
Yes, and I'm trying. You know, I'm looking to get a job in IT. I have a high school education. I'm about 38 years old. And I got kids and a wife that doesn't drive. A lot of stuff going on. It's very difficult for me to learn this. I spent time watching that James Harr guy. Oh, that guy was tough to listen to. He has really ADD. Do you ever see any of those videos?
I've seen a number of them, and it's sort of like something in this industry that brings us all together. I think all of us have a little bit of that attention issue in some way or another.
Would you say it'd be a difficult job with someone with ADD? I'm trying to maybe get medicated for it, possibly, and give that a shot.
The thing I like about technology in general is that there are a lot of options. Some of these options deal with you focusing on what is on your screen and solving a problem associated with that. Some jobs in IT are very focused on talking to people and doing one-on-one and looking at someone in the eye and trying to explain a very complex issue in a very simple way. Other jobs are ones where you are sent out to you're parachuting in to fix a problem, and you are specially trained to fix a very specific kind of problem. So for different people, I think there's the right job in technology for you. This is a little bit different than other markets, by the way. For if you're someone who's a teacher, if you're somebody in medicine, if you're somebody who is a truck driver, there's not that broad scope of jobs out there that would fit with whatever your personality interests you the most. So I think absolutely there's jobs out there that would fit perfectly for what you're trying to do. What I would recommend for you is to be able to meet as many people as possible. You've got a few challenges with just education, because without having a formal college degree, you're competing against people that do. So getting certifications is great. Having a good home lab is great. Having some experience in the industry helps, whether it's volunteering or part-time work or working with contractual type things to get some education or some practical experience under your belt. But one of the things that I think helps the most is meeting people in the industry. And if you can go to a Microsoft user group, a Cisco user group would be fantastic for what you're doing, and meet the people who are there and get on their LinkedIn and get relationships going with them. It helps immensely. And if it helps with, if you have ADD and it helps to get medicated so you can go to those types of things and make those relationships, let me tell you, the relationship side of this goes much farther than anything that anyone else has ever said. It goes farther than education, than certifications, and in some cases than your experience. Interestingly enough, and I am proof of that. Let me tell you, I've had probably 15 different jobs in the industry through the years. And I mean different roles in jobs. Systems engineer manager. I worked in technical marketing roles. I worked in outside sales roles, in systems engineering. And every single one of those, my very first job I got because of just going out and just trying to find the job. But every job after that, the other 14 jobs I got because, or the 14 jobs I got, somebody who worked there, I knew them. I knew someone who already worked at the organization I was going to work with. Don't discount that. It's an incredibly valuable thing. People want to hire people they know. People want to hire people they can trust. And sometimes that is much more important than what you happen to know at that particular time. Trust me, we're gonna hire Harry. We know him. He's not incredibly strong in Microsoft, but we can train that part. We know he's smart enough to do it. Let's get him in here. He shows up every day on time. He leaves at the end of the day, and he's back the next day, and he's nice the whole time he's here. This is the kind of person we want to work with. It's shocking how important that is and how much people discount that as not being important. It's incredibly important.
Okay, so what would you suggest that I get into, like, you know, an entry-level position where I can actually, like, learn and make money at the same time? I'm working for HP right now as a sales rep for HP.
What arm of HP? Is it one relating to computers or technology?
Yeah, well, it's like Market Source. We sell laptops and, you know, we promote the printers.
Great.
So, you know, I figured, I don't know, it seems kind of difficult to get a CCNA and then get into a job. It seems like it'll take me probably a year at least to get the test and then to get a job, land a job doing it.
Well, you've got an issue. You first need to, it's small steps. Every time you move in technology, it's a small step. People want to start on the networking team, but the networking team doesn't want to hire anybody as entry level. Same thing with security. You don't want to hire somebody in security entry level. Most people start at the help desk, whether the help desk has somehow been maligned as being a horrible place to work. One of my very first job, very similar to what you're saying, I worked with a computer company in South Miami. This was, it was a small little storefront, but they had the contract to provide computers to all of Miami-Dade County, at the time, Dade County government. So this is thousands and thousands and thousands of desktops. And so the computers were just streaming out the door. I was the guy sent to fix the computer, to replace the hard drive, to do a warranty repair, to upgrade the memory, to move one machine off the desk and move another one on, to replace the monitor. I was the grunt guy that kind of handled that lower level technical thing. And at the time, this was very easy to do. Replacing memory only takes a second. It was IBM machines. Their thumb screws in the back. You can replace memory in 30 seconds, and I was out the door. So I was that guy that did that very rote work and made that happen. The next job I got was actually 9 months later. I went to work for an insurance company who was one of our customers that had a help desk. And their help desk was one, it was a corporate help desk. You weren't on the phone every day. It wasn't in a warehouse full of people. You came, actually at that time, we came to work in a coat and a tie and nice clothes. We were a financial company. So I would go to my desk. There would be a ticketing system. Someone's having a problem. I could walk up to their desk. I could go to the other building. I could grab a keyboard. I could go troubleshoot Windows on their desktop, whatever it happened to be. That was a fantastic role for learning what I wanted to do next, because I got a piece of operating system. I got a piece of hardware. I got a little piece of the networking side of things. I understood the connectivity to the mainframe. And I got to talk to the people who manage those things. So I got to talk to the people who manage the file servers, who manage the networks. And when a big project was going on and they needed a warm body in the room to help unpack systems, to set up a new section of a department, to move machines from one side of the building to the other, to help upgrade the servers, to stand there and put floppy disks. This was back in the day where you have to keep putting floppy disks in, and there was like 20 of them, and you were the guy in charge of going from the third floppy disk to the fourth one. They needed somebody to do that. I would volunteer. And like, I will absolutely be here. It's on a Saturday night. We're sitting here. We're talking about war stories and these crazy things, and we're putting floppy disks in. But I learned about what their job was. They learned about what I knew about the job. And eventually I got a job working with people that manage those servers, which then moved me into a group of people that managed the network, which then moved me into a group of people that sold network technology, which then ultimately moved me into security. So it's these little jumps that get you from place to place. You have to start at the bottom. It's going to be just a grunty job, and you're going to put in a lot of time, but you're going to learn a lot. And that's what's going to help you move to the next level and the next level. The good thing about technology is there's not a top level. You just keep moving up. If you want to make a lot of money in IT, you can make a lot of money. If you want to have very flexible schedule, you can find a job where you have a very flexible schedule. You get to decide where you want to go from there. But the sky's the limit, and as long as you're willing to learn and put in the time, you can really do whatever you want to do in IT.
Yeah, I put a lot of time in, that's for sure, and I'm trying really, really hard. Yeah, so realistically, it's probably not smart to go for the CCNA. I should probably get an A+ and get like a help desk job, correct?
I would
realistically in the time frame.
That's a very common path. I would highly recommend you do as much research as possible. Find out what the local organizations have, what jobs they have open. Find some that have a help desk job open and see what they're asking for. See if there is someone who does have down the street in the same geographical area. They're hiring for help desk. Do they ask for an A+? Do they ask for Microsoft certifications? Find out what they're asking for, and then focus your efforts from there.
Probably more better, right? Is it because more people use Microsoft?
The best thing is for people often say, which one of these is the better certification to get? The better certification to get is the one that the hiring manager wants you to have. So there's never a best answer. Very commonly, it's A+. After A+, it's either Microsoft or Cisco, depending on what people want to do. From there, it branches off again into many, many other things. But I think most people are focused on getting somebody at the help desk who knows the basics. They know that people aren't going to be experts in this out of the gate, but getting you in on the help desk gives them an opportunity to decide, are you worth moving into one of these other apartments? Should you stay in the help desk? Or maybe it's better off that you go think about doing something else for a living. And that's really a great place that most people start, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah, the A+ seems kind of fairly easy. I think I've been watching some videos, and it seems mostly basic knowledge, and all the networking part pretty much I got because studying the ICNG1.
And it's true. I think the security side of things is incredibly useful to know. That the networking side of things is a powerful, and some people even say, why are you starting with A+? Why aren't you starting with Cisco? Well, it's because people don't hire entry level with Cisco. You got to start somewhere. Right. In fact, I would be careful getting CCNA and applying for a job at a help desk. They're going to see, whoa, you already know all the Cisco stuff. This job's going to bore you to death. I'll find somebody who's a better fit for this position. Overqualifying yourself is a very, very real thing. You have to be very careful when you're applying for these jobs that your resume and what you know is positioned in a way to the employer that meets what they're looking for. You never want to overscope yourself in a position. They're not going to hire you. You'll be gone, and this guy will be bored in a month, and he'll be out of here, and we'll have to start this process all over again. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, you have a professional-looking camera. The studio sounds good. You're doing a pro.
Good. Mrs. Professor Messer is so happy I spent all this money on this, so I will let her know that all worked out okay. I appreciate the call. Best of luck, sir.
I appreciate the call.
Absolutely. That's always a challenge, is finding the right mix for what you're trying to do. At one point, because you get to a point in this world where I knew a lot of networking, I knew a lot of operating systems, I knew a lot of security. Sometimes I would have multiple resumes. If I'm applying to a company that's focused on operating systems, I'll send them my operating system resume. If they're focused on security, I'll send them my security resume. But what if I wanted to work for somebody who's really into network management? I had spent 10 years with the network management field, understanding the protocols, understanding reporting, understanding service level agreements, understanding the PKIs, understanding the details about collecting data and reporting on it. But I'd also written a book on Nmap. Now, if you see those on a resume, you might say, well, you need a security job. Or you might say, well, you might fit here, but it was too broad. So I created a resume that was really more focused, that if I was going after a particular role, here's what I know and how I can help you in that role. And then it was up to the person interviewing to decide, is this person really going to be a good fit or not? That was, in my mind, a better way to approach this, rather than just throwing everything on the wall and saying, hey, what's going to stick? What do you think? This is a very common thing when people think they really should be getting A+ network security, A+, network plus, and security plus, and then they go to interview for a help desk position. They may have overshot that a little bit. You might have only needed an A plus. With some help desks, they don't want you to have any certifications so they can pay you less, get you in the door, and they'll train you, which is not a bad strategy from the company's perspective. We can get people in. If they work out, we'll pay them more later on. If they don't work out, we can have them do something else somewhere else. That's business. So we'll figure out the details of this. And in the meantime, we're not having to spend a lot of money on personnel. We can keep the costs low because your requirements are such that you don't have any certifications yet. So there's sometimes you can find the right mix. Now, if you do have a certification, maybe that job doesn't fit for you. You need to go find somewhere that appreciates that you have an A+ certification and will pay you properly for that. I'm not saying that you should ever discount yourself in a job. You should never discount yourself in a job. There are way too many jobs in IT and way too many companies to work for. You're not going to work for a company and stay there your entire career. You will work there a number of years, and then you will move to a different company or move to a different part of that company. And usually it's all based around your value and the salary that you can demand as a technical professional. That's a completely different video that we can do for a completely different time. I don't have any headway on the logic bomb article. I'm going to have to, one of these days, I'm going to sit down and come up with a set of, I don't want to call it a vlog. I keep talking about wanting to do a vlog and sitting down every day and doing maybe just a quick 15-minute live stream on the craziness that I saw today. But I don't want to make myself look a little bit too weird, as if that's too late. We might have already passed that one. That might be too far gone. And then I say, well, if I already look weird, why not just do it? I didn't find the Logic Bomb article. Any tips for getting into security? Not any more than I've already given you today. Learn as much as you can about networking. Sort of doesn't make sense, does it? You should learn as much as you can about networking if you want to get into security. It is so true. And we've had people call the study group afterwards who are in security, and they say the same thing. It's not just me. I'm telling you what I've seen, but I've also had other people say it as well. As crazy as it sounds, that is exactly how you should get into security. It is remarkable. If we're talking about IT security, we're talking about security operational roles of protecting data within the organization. Oh, we have to put scopes on this. Everything is cybersecurity, cybersecurity, cybersecurity these days, which unfortunately, I'm still not sure what it means. One of these days we'll figure it out. In fact, if you notice, there is a cybersecurity subreddit. When somebody says, how do I get a job in cybersecurity? The first response is, what do you mean by cybersecurity? Because it's not a thing. So you do have to worry about that. Will says in the chat room, all the networking jobs around me are minimum CCNA qualified. Yep, that's about right. I would probably think that as being a minimum qualification for a networking job. Yeah, cybersecurity, and everybody wants to be a pen tester, which is great. There's just not that many pen testing jobs out in the world. And quite honestly, a pen testing job has a ceiling. There's a limit to where you can go with that. It is a very niche role. You're very focused. It is a role that can give you a lot of money, relatively speaking, but there's a ceiling to it. And then where do you go? Once you hit the ceiling, and you've done this for 6 years, 3 years, if you've done pen testing, which probably has some travel associated with it, how do you get into an IT role? You have no experience with firewalls. You have no experience with IPSs. You've done nothing with IPsec VPNs. You've done nothing with multi-factor authentication, managing applications and their security, managing users' policies. You've just been focused on trying to find an exploit in Windows 10 version whatever. That's a challenge. And you're really not going to get a pen testing job right out of the gate either. You need more knowledge behind you. Probably in that case, more knowledge with applications and operating systems. But 80% of pen testing is documentation, which is probably true. It probably is true. That makes it even worse. Why would you do that? It's a good point. It is not always the fun stuff. It sure sounds good, doesn't it? Pen testing. That is a sexy job. Everybody wants to be a pen. It is. That does sound good. I heard it. I think that's great. You can travel, and you can travel the world, and you can do cool things, and you can break into these systems, and it is cool. And that's the problem, is that that's a pretty cool job. It's just that there aren't a lot of them. And if somebody comes to me and says, how do I get started with technology? Well, first you need to learn how to manage a nuclear power plant. Why would we start there? Why don't you start with understanding more about physics and nuclear physics in general? That's where you need to begin. So that's where I sort of approach IT security is, let's get a broad understanding of what we're talking about first. Then we can go into being a SIM expert, to being a next generation firewall expert, to being a pen testing expert. We can jump from there. And that's my approach. It's not that pen testing is something I hate. I think it's very cool. It's not that I think it's not viable. It's very viable. I know people that do pen testing. They love it, and it's a great job. But if you look at the number of jobs available, it's this tiny little sliver of the world. And you do need to be at the highest level of what you're doing to be able to do it well. It's not running scripts and trying to find the vulnerability all day. So it's a little different than that. It's a little different than the industry and even the media makes it seem. It's a lot different. But they see the weirdest stuff. They see the coolest stuff. And I'm not sure that's exactly what I want to see or do, though. But there's plenty of opportunities to see the world other ways. My role in technology has taken me around the world. I have been to Australia and Bangkok and London and Germany and around and even Canada. So I can tell you, it's crazy what people will pay you to do to get on a plane and go somewhere, and yet they do it. And here we are. So it's a lot of fun, and you can make it whatever you want to make it. Was my point to that last caller. Just figure out what you want to do. There's a job in IT for you to do that. IT is the great equalizer. It is the one that gives anybody, whoever you happen to be, whatever you think might be a thing with you, you can get past it because there's a job for that in IT. So just keep working on what you're doing. Keep learning more. There's always something to learn. There's always something to do. There's always that next job, and IT can give that to you. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for the folks in the chat room, for the folks that called in, the folks during the first hour answering the questions. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. One of the things that is always nice whenever we're putting together these live events is that there's always going to be some type of feedback and information from you. I learn just as much watching the chat sometimes than hopefully I'm giving back to you. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. Follow us, check us again next month. We'll do another one of these Security Plus Study groups. We've got a couple of A Plus Study groups and a Network Plus Study group before then. Make sure you check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar for the next one. Otherwise, we will see you next month on the next Security Plus Study group. Thanks, everyone.